Yeah, Dwayne.
Christopher?
You don't have a mute thing on your video image, so it's on your side.
Who are you? You're talking to Dwayne?
Yeah.
So let's see if Dave's here. Everybody is here. 1, 2. I'm just counting. I'm going back to my 1, 2, 3s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and Dave. Okay, Dwayne, you figured it out? Well, do you mind if we start even? Okay. Okay. So welcome to this Aspen School District Board of Education meeting. We'll call the meeting to order Tuesday, February 16th, 4 p.m., 4:01 p.m. And Eliza, can you call, I'm calling the meeting to order, and can you call roll, please?
Sure. Katie Frisch.
Here.
Susan Marolt.
Here.
Jonathan Nickel.
Here.
Dwayne Romero is here. Thumbs up. And Susie Zimmett.
Here.
All right. Thank you. All 5 present.
And can I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Quick roll call. Katie Frisch.
Aye.
Susan Marolt.
Aye.
Jonathan Nickel.
Aye.
Dwayne Romero. And Susie Zimmett.
Aye.
So,
I did want to point out that Linda wanted 6 point just a part of 6.2 moved up to before the DAC. Just the right, Eliza. She wanted the audit coming before the DAC. Do you feel strongly, Linda? We didn't discuss that just now.
Yes, please, if we could. I noticed Yadira is on the line here, and I just wanted to speed up her time.
Does anybody see a problem if we do that, even though we didn't? Susan, you think it's fine?
I think that's fine. Yeah.
Okay. All right. We'll do that then. So 4 is board member updates, and if anybody has anything to say, if not, we can move on to public comment if there are any.
I just have one quick thing, which
ahead.
is I'd like to thank the county, the state, and especially Dave Baugh for all his work on getting our teachers and staff vaccinated. I had a little bit of insight into what was going on behind the scenes, and there was a lot of lobbying going on in the last couple of weeks to try to get doses for our community commensurate with our true population. And there was a lot of work that went into making it all happen. And so thanks to everybody, and congratulations to those who were able to partake, and hopefully anyone else who's still in the pipeline will be able to finish it up soon. But I'm super excited for everybody. So congratulations and thank you all.
Anybody else? Any other board member? So we will move on to public comment. Stephanie Nixon, is she here? It'll be so great to see her. Oh, there, I see. Yes, there she is.
Hi.
Welcome back. Nice, great to see you. And I'll turn it over to you now.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Nixon. I am here as myself today. I know that there's not a whole lot of love in these public comments, so I just wanted to come on and give y'all some love. Last week I was in a really serious accident on Highway 82, and I was hospitalized, and my daughter was taken to Denver via ambulance. And right away, I just wanted to say thank you so much for Katie and Susie and Susan for reaching out directly to me. I really appreciated it. It was a dark time in the hospital, mostly because of COVID rules, and I was by myself. But I just wanted to say thank you so much. And I know this is gonna sound like an Emmy speech, but Dave has been amazingly supportive. Theron is one of the most compassionate people I've ever worked with. Dan has been incredible. I just wanted to say that all 4 buildings, the cottage has been amazing. They've just sent so much love to me and my daughter. Chris Bastion at the elementary school reached out, and they're doing everything they can to get my kid back in the building, which is amazing. I know I'm going to forget a bunch of people too. My peeps at the middle school, they've been coming by my house in my neighborhood and dropping us off stuff. And it's been insanely helpful. And then of course, my administrators at the high school and my staff at the high school, Becky Oliver, who, you know, I couldn't do it without, and Sarah Strasburger, who has been incredibly supportive and even puts up with me texting her with my left hand. So I just really, really, really from the bottom of my heart, just wanted to say thank you to this community and to everybody on this call. I know that it hasn't been an easy year, and I'm just grateful to be here with all of you, and I'm grateful to be able to still work with all of you. So I just wanted to say thank you so, so much. And if I forgot anybody, I really do apologize. There were so many people who are so grateful. I'm so grateful for. So we're recovering. We have external and internal injuries, but I was back online today at the high school. It felt so great. So I'm just really, really happy. I want to say thank you also to some kids and some parents that have reached out to me as well in the community. So I just appreciate, oh gosh, and Cam Daniel. Cam Daniel was first on the scene. He was actually the first responder to my accident. So it was really nice to see a familiar face in a time that was awful, one of the worst day of my life. So I'm just here to say I'm thankful that I'm here, and I'm thankful to work with all of you, and I appreciate the compassion so much at this time. And wear your seatbelts. Thank you.
We are so happy that you are back and well enough to be doing what you're doing and on the mend. So welcome back. And we're so glad it was not more serious than it was.
Yeah, me too. Thank you. And I really thank you for calling me, and thank you all for reaching out. It was, you know, it's COVID times out there in the hospital, and it's lonely. So I appreciate it so much, more than y'all will ever know. Really, thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Any other public comments? That's the only one I saw on the agenda, Eliza?
Correct, that was the only
Okay.
one.
All right. So instead of going to reports and comments, we'll go to, per Linda's recommendation, auditors. Right? Audit.
Yes, I'm going to go ahead. I see Paul is on the call here too. So Paul, I'm going to turn it over to you. Nice to see you.
Hey guys, thank you. My name's Paul Bacchus, and I am a CPA with a firm called McMahon & Associates, and I'm actually located in Avon, Colorado. And just kind of a little introduction to those of you that don't know us. We kind of have a specific specialty. We do audits of governments, including city, county, pretty much every special district in Aspen, and I think pretty much all of the maybe 20 or so central Rockies school districts in Colorado, and including Compass. So we're here as the Aspen School District auditors, and every district has to have a financial statement audit. And if I can just briefly share my screen here. Let's make sure I got the right screen. Okay, so you should be able to see me kind of bouncing around here. Just to kind of explain what we do when we do a financial statement audit, and this is really cool if you're kind of nerdy at all. An audit entails planning, field work, and reporting. And so a lot of planning is getting information from each district. So we use a function called Engagement Organizer, and that essentially is kind of like a client portal. So when you go into Engagement Organizer, you can see in here, it shows kind of each item by area that we need. So as an example, here's a request
Hey,
for,
Paul, you're just presenting the CAFR.
hold on. Thank you. Let me try one more time. It's hard to find the, not sure why I thought it always showed the, I might have to, it should be able to show your screen as it changes, but I'll go with this. So this is basically a client portal. So we request for various items. So like as an example, here's, schedule of housing loans at June 30th. Please provide copies of promissory notes, blah, blah, blah. And then your team can upload various items and include all the attachments. And so this is kind of items that Linda and her team has uploaded. Once we're done with that, I'm gonna make sure that I'm sharing the right screen. We pull it into our software. And so this is our software, and you can see each of these is an item that's involved in the planning part. So as an example, I won't go into a lot of detail. We're reading all your minutes and resolutions and going through trying to understand decisions you've made. But probably the biggest area of planning that would impact you guys, or you'd probably find interesting, is we spend quite a bit of time looking through your financial statements or through your internal controls, trying to understand how does money come in, how does money go out from the district. So each one of these items is a work paper. You can see this is, say, purchasing card testing, prepared by somebody and then reviewed in our office, Senzug, and reviewed by Yadira. And so we go through each area of the district's internal controls. So, cash receipt, inventory, payroll, treasury, and so forth. And we're really looking for areas of improvement or areas of risk maybe that the associate or the district has in the financial statement audit. So once we're done with the planning, then we move on to the field work. And the field work is kind of the same. This is the cash and investment section. And you can see as an example, if your financial statements say, I'm not sure if that changed to what you're seeing, but it's a bank statement with the Alpine Bank, and it says, okay, your district has X dollars in the bank, and the amount that's on there agrees to the financial statements, and then we send bank confirms. And so each of these items is a work paper. So we go down cash, accounts receivable. Are we getting the correct amount from from Pitkin County for what you guys milled? Capital assets, do we have all the assets accounted for? Is it depreciated appropriately? Is it capitalized, insured? Accounts payable, we can pull all the database with all your transactions going to vendors, and we can sort it by vendor and look for late payments, interest, late fees, things like that. High risk vendors. Payroll is a big chunk of each district. Virtually every district and school is 80 to 90% payroll. So we go through and look at all your payroll transactions, trying to understand what did you report to Para and the IRS? Does that agree with what you have on your financial statements? Do we follow all our kind of policies that the board has approved? The other big area is debt. So anytime you issue debt or any kind of obligation here, these are various bond obligations that you've had in the past. And there are promises that the district made when you issued that debt to comply with certain items. So once we've gone through all that, we're verifying everything ties back to the financial statement numbers. And you can see each one of these items in here is, done by a CPA in our office and then reviewed by one of us. And so when I look, we've scanned in 384 different work papers that were originally uploaded or emailed by Linda and her team, pulled into our software, and they back up the financial statements. And the reason I point that out is because that's kind of the entire process, and I want you guys to understand that there's a lot of work that goes into it on the backside to help ensure that what I'm about to present to you is accurate. So, Yadira, is this the CAFR now? Okay. Frustrating, but for some reason it won't let me share just the desktop. But so ultimately all of the work of those 384 different work papers is to help prepare or verify the financial statements. So Aspen does what's called a CAFR, which is a little more of a comprehensive report that larger districts do. I think you and Roaring Fork and Eagle and Summit do them, but some of the smaller ones in the area just do general purpose. And that has a bunch of different documents in here, but this is June 30th, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but I just want to point out a couple things. There's the independent auditor's report in the financial statements, and this is referred to as an unmodified opinion. It means the financial statements are accurate and you can rely on them. They're materially correct. And if you looked at the document, you'd see it's massive. So it's 125 pages long. And the reason that it's so long is there's a lot of different people that use it. So it's not just the board. It's going to ultimately go to the federal government as part of your grants, the state government, CDE as compliance, the Colorado State Auditor. It gets uploaded to the SEC through a website called EMA and distributed to all your bondholders. So when you build a district, you issued bonds, they're sold in $5,000 increments throughout the world, and all those bondholders get this financial information. Goes to your banking relationships, your insurance relationships. So that's why you have a 125-page report, just so you guys aren't looking at that going, I don't need 125 pages. We have to follow GAAP, and GAAP being generally accepted accounting principles, and your report does follow that. I'm just going to kind of briefly point out one item in here, and that's just the government financial statements. So this is June 30th, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail in this, but I'll just point out, here are your funds. All the smaller funds get collapsed and called non-major funds. Revenues come in. So we have 29 million in revenues in the general fund, 40 million across all our governmental funds. And then expenditures go out, and each school district auditing is really kind of specific. Each school district in the state has to follow a chart of accounts mandated by the Colorado Department of Education. And so it has to be reported a certain way, and they report based upon programs, which is direct instruction, indirect instruction. But I don't know if you've ever seen a school district chart of accounts, but it's like a 30-digit account code, and you can kind of sort the data in a bunch of different methods. But revenues come in, expenses go out, we have some transfers back and forth, and we get to this net change in fund balances. Really, the district had a pretty basic year in the general fund. You added 188,000 to your beginning fund balance. Fund balance is basically money in the bank. Think of it as cash basis. So you started with 6.6 million, you added 188,000, you ended with 6.8. On all the districts and pretty much every government, I like to take this 6.8 million and divide it by the 28 million to come up with a fund balance reserve. That's kind of a metric that a lot of people look at. You have a 24% fund balance reserve, which is a perfectly reasonable, prudent reserve to have. You want to keep in mind that your cash flows are not always consistent, because you receive 18 million in property taxes, and property taxes all come in February, March, April. So you have to have a reasonable fund balance reserve to get through the rest of the year. Debt service went up a little bit. That's just collecting money coming in and then money going out to pay your outstanding bonds. You'll see you had $6 million paid down this year. The capital projects fund is kind of for capital expenditures. This year, I think the only major items that were in there were Shining, somebody help me, Shining
Shining
Man?
Mountain, Shining Mountain.
Thank you. All I could have in my head was Shining Path, which was like the cult that that followed the comet. But yeah, Shining Mountain units, and then I think you did some turf work also on your field. So that drew down your capital project fund by 1.2 million, ended with 1.9, but capital projects fund flowed up and down. So in total, you ended pretty much break even. You got to keep in mind there's $41 million rolling through here, and you used 180,000 in total. So financially, the district looks really good. Not any concerns there. There is a lot of additional information in here. I'm not going to really spend a lot of time going through it because a lot of it is for various other parties. Has debt on here. You can see you have 71 million in long-term obligations, but that includes 42 million in para. Para is think of it as Social Security for government employees, I guess. And then there's budget actual statements in here. I don't know, a bunch of different information, statistical information. So that's the financial statements. Are there any questions on kind of the process or where you ended the year before I kind of move on to the our recommended letter? Okay, hearing none, I am going to reshare the letter. So as part of any audit, so keep in mind this is meant to be in a certain type of spirit. It would be really unusual for us to audit a $41 million entity and not have recommendations. So there are certain things that that all auditors have to communicate to governing board, and then there are certain ones that are added in here as items that we noted. So I'm just going to kind of briefly walk you through this. This is called a governing board letter, and so the first part of it is items that we have to communicate as independent auditors to the governing board. And it starts off with qualitative aspects of accounting policy. So what we have to communicate to you is, are there any changes to how the financial statements look? And CDE changed kind of how the pupil activity funds are handled. And so that's a change in there. And if anywhere you maybe saw a restatement in there, that relates to this change that CDE required, but it doesn't really have much of an impact on you. At least I wouldn't think so as a governing board member. The second part of it is, what's the biggest estimate? Sometimes you have really hard to estimate items like maybe an environmental liability or legal liability. You have the same as virtually every other district in the state. How long are your assets going to last? But you follow standard useful lives. And how much is the para liability, but you have no control over that. That's determined by the state. But it is an estimate that para's actuaries provide us. And then there's a thing called OPEB, other post-employment benefits. That's called para care. But again, those are all provided by para, and the district really doesn't have any control over that. So that's the biggest estimate that you have in there. Difficulties encountered in performing the audit. This year was a little challenge because I think because of COVID and everything else, but we do schedule according to kind of when you guys request for CPAs. And I think there was just a lot of stuff that kind of came in after that. And I think if again, it's up to you when you get your audited financial statements. I like to get them prior to year end, but that's kind of up to the district. But if you want to kind of maintain the schedule that in the past we've had, my recommendation would be, pick that week and then make sure you've gotten through the data pipeline. So this gets a little complicated, but the district, the district has to upload all your transactions to CDE, and then they spit out certain changes like, does the amount of equalization that the district reports equal what CDE paid you for equalization? Does this grant on your financial statements equal how much CDE provided you in that grant? And I think you really want to get through level 1 of this process prior to field work, if that's pretty much what you have to do to make sure that stuff doesn't kind of end up rolling out longer than it needs to be. But 2020 was an unusual year, and I know you guys have had some turnover in some of your base departments, and that creates a lot of problems too. We're also required to report to you any changes we make to the financial statements. So we upload, or you guys upload all that data, and we set about verifying it. An easy way to put this is, what journal entries did we come up with as a result of the audit? And so there's a number of them here. And these are changes that were made kind of as a result of the audit process. Some of them are pretty typical, like adjusting the para for the proportionate share. We pretty much do that with every district. And then some of them are stuff that you guys probably want to work on a little bit, interfunds, making sure the due to from the amount due on one fund equals the payable on another fund. And then we did help with the charter school allocation and the sales tax receivable on the Aspen Education Foundation grant. So those are journal entries that were made as kind of the result of this process. Disagreements with management, I really haven't ever had any, but that would be where we kind of insist something be presented a certain way and management thinks it should be presented a different way. You guys follow GAAP, and I've never had a feeling that anybody there doesn't want the financial statements to follow that. Your staff does sign a representation letter. I kind of call it a I didn't lie, cheat, or steal letter. It basically means that, they provided us all the information, were forthright with their answers, and to the best of their ability gave us everything we needed. So those are the items that all auditors have to communicate to all board members. And then we have certain items that are maybe more specific to Aspen, and I'm going to actually turn this over to Yadira. Yadira is a CPA and a manager in our office, I don't know, for a number of years. She's also a certified fraud examiner and one of the best CPAs I personally know, and I know a lot of them. So go ahead, Yadira.
Thanks, Paul. So yeah, as Paul pointed out, in our planning kind of section of the audit, we talk to every department of the district, especially the ones that handle money coming into the district. And when we see any kind of recommendations, so any opportunities for improvement, this is kind of the section where we report it. A few of these are the same as prior year. I think Linda's been trying to clean up a lot of them, but some still weren't cleaned up as of June 30th of 2020. So I'll kind of briefly go through them and let me know if there's any questions on these. The first one is activity funds. So the secretaries at each school are taking money. And so because they have the ability to collect fees, as well as record the deposits, there's a little bit of a lack of segregation of duty because duties between that, because they have access to the cash as well as the reconciliation part of it. We see this a lot in a lot of districts just because it's hard, unless you have a lot of staff or a large number of staff, it's kind of hard to separate those duties, but nonetheless, it is a risk that cash could go missing or be misappropriated. So we're just letting you know there's kind of an opportunity to strengthen those controls there. And then next is segregation of duties over payroll. The person kind of performing payroll duties has the ability to modify pay rates. So when, I think there's a reason for that. I think there's a lot of kind of changes that during payroll have to be made. So she does have the ability to change pay rates. We typically like to see that segregated, and whoever's processing payroll should not be able to change pay rates or make modifications, just so that there are a number of individuals kind of looking over that process. So we are recommending that either somebody else modifies pay rates, or you have kind of a very thorough kind of review to make sure that everything is correct. And then also we noted that we had a
Yeah,
little bit of,
Hold on, just a sec. Just on that first one, I just wanted to get your opinion. I went back and looked at the last 5 letters, and it seems like, at least on the activity funds, while there's still opportunities for improvement, we have made significant progress. Is that a correct assessment?
I think you have, where, you know, it's not all 3 kind of sides of the transaction cycle are controlled by the secretaries, but there is still, it's always pretty hard to separate the taking of the cash and kind of the recording of the cash, just because you don't have more than one secretary or both available. So I think you have made some improvement, but it is still a risk.
I think probably the biggest improvement is a lot of it's gone electronic.
Sure.
In the past, which is beneficial. And keep in mind on these areas, so internal controls really are who does what at its core, and that's ultimately determined by you as a district. And so we have times where districts say, you know, this is the only way we can do it. You know, we're not adding staff, we're not changing this, and that's perfectly fine for you as a board and management. But it's our job to communicate to you when we see a risk. So just be aware, kind of take it in the spirit it's intended, I guess.
No, yeah, I guess I was just trying to, you know, as I look back over the reports, well, I'm not saying we're where we need to be at all, but from what it was a couple of years ago to just having cash and manual receipts to now where we're getting electronic funds and everything. I mean, it seems to be, at least on the surface, the amount of control has increased greatly.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think you guys implemented e-funds, which really kind of helped. It's just those kind of random revenues. Like, I think we put an example of like ticket sales, that is just hard to know how much you should have, because there is no obviously report saying how many people attended. It's all very manual. So we're just kind of making you aware that those kind of things are risky.
But just one question, how material is that relative to prior years? What kind of dollar volume did we used to be, and now where are we? So we can just kind of understand what kind of risk level you're talking about.
I don't necessarily have an amount, just because it's a number of revenue streams.
Well,
But you guys consider it material, is my question. Like, it's a large enough amount that it's worth being the first bullet point, which to me implies we need to really work on it. So that's why I'm trying to kind of understand
so the student athletics fund had 991,000 in it. I wouldn't say all that is necessarily at risk, but that's what rolled through that fund. I don't know if that answers your question, but
No, I was really wondering how much of it is cash based versus, but that's something we can follow up and Linda with. I'm just, want to make sure that the risk that's remaining from, we seem to have moved a lot to electronic. So the risk of what's left in manual, we're always going to have some, right? I mean, I don't think any organization can get entirely away from it. I'm just wondering how, you know, where are we on the spectrum relative to others, and how big of a piece is this? But if you can't answer that now, that's fine.
Yeah, I can certainly get back to you on more accurate numbers, but I think the way I look at internal controls is it's kind of not as, at least I don't look at it as much as materiality, because it's usually more of a headline. You know, if somebody steals, maybe it's only 5,000 years, but if it's over 20 years, you know, things like that, it can kind of add up. So I like to kind of report any recommendation that I see, but we can certainly discuss whether you're only interested in kind of material amounts.
So I just have a question. In school districts where you see this being handled, you know, to the degree where you've resolved any risk, is it they have separate people who, like, one person collects actually the cash and another person is doing the reconciliation report? Is that how you would like to see it?
Typically, yes. I mean, you can try to come up with other ways, such as like a lockbox where people drop cash and the employee doesn't have access to it. Or somebody takes the deposit to the bank and then they just reconcile to a deposit slip and not the actual cash. So there are kind of multiple ways, but typically the best is if you have more employees. But if you don't, there are kind of methods that you can use to kind of control the access to the cash typically.
And do you have those suggestions in this report?
I believe in the first comment, we did have an example of how to handle things such as like a home. I think we had a special event in there, like homecoming tickets or athletic gate fees.
And the reconciling the deposits versus, oh yeah, reconcile back to.
That, I mean, that's just an example, but if we can certainly work with Linda if you have specific events or specific anything that you want our recommendation on.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, so kind of going back to payroll, I think we found a few approvals we're missing for time cards. Obviously that can pose a risk, so we just reported that as well. And then employee files, we pulled a few employees for payroll testing, and there was just one employee that we selected that we could not have, or your staff could not find certain files in their employee files. So we recommend that, you know, HR kind of make sure that they have all employee files that are required. Next is segregation of duties. Again, kind of same issue with preschool reseating. The preschool director is or was using it. I think there's been some staff turnover there, but they were using QuickBooks to kind of keep track of the billings for the preschool as well as collections. And then those kind of got taken over to Linda to be recorded in iVisions, which is where the financial statements stem from. So anytime you have kind of two different systems that don't interface, we usually recommend that there is a reconciliation so that you're ensuring that both systems agree. So what the preschool QuickBooks is showing is what iVisions is showing as well. So we, especially because there's quite a bit of money rolling through there, we recommend that a reconciliation be done with that. Okay, next is stale checks. So just during our testing of your bank reconciliations, we noticed there was a few old outstanding checks that look like maybe stale checks that either need to maybe be written off or remitted to the Great Colorado Payback. So we suggest that Linda goes through those and kind of clears out anything that won't be cashed or that needs to go to the payback. Next is the vacation accrual payout. So I think during 2020, there were 2 employees that terminated their employment with the district, and they were paid out a more than the maximum allowed vacation accrual amount. I think during discussions with Linda, it seemed like the pay stub is not accurately reflecting the amount of hours that are accrued for each employee. So I think that was part of it. And the payouts were paid during the year, but it did violate the district's policy because it exceeded the amount, the max amount that people should be accruing. So we recommend that the pay stubs be kind of addressed and ensure that those are correct going forward and that the district is not paying out anything over that max. And that's it as far as recommendations. The last kind of comment is just kind of an upcoming standard that you will have to implement, but it's not until, I believe it's your fiscal year 2022 that you'll have to implement. It's a standard on leases, so it just changes the way you present your leases. It's basically moving most operating leases to capital leases. Anybody have any questions or comments?
Thank you, Yadira. I'd like to step in for just a second and get a little bit of an update. We've taken all of the recommendations from our auditors and with the assistance of the FAB, our Financial Accounting Board, and then also with my staff, we've started addressing, cleaning up some of those things. And the easy one is stale dated checks. I think that's already done now. We've cleaned those up, and then we're diving into preschool and cleaning that up at the moment. And actually not even really cleaning it up, just hitting documented processes to make sure we're all on the same page. I guess one thing COVID has done is given us a little bit of a reprieve to kind of clean up preschool, since we seem to keep having to shut down and then reopen. And so these are very high, all of them, I would say, on the list we take very seriously, and we're coming up with ideas to correct anything so we can just get better each year.
I have one question about preschool. Is there any reason why it can't be in iVisions with everything else?
That's actually what we're looking into, and I think that's what's going to happen. Danielle Pratt took some iVisions classes to learn more about the receivables module in iVisions and move it over there. It's currently sitting in QuickBooks, and unfortunately, when you have a non-accountant entering transactions, they don't always understand the ramifications of, just leaving old data in there or recording it in a strange manner to get it off their one report they need. So that's that was happening. And, we don't have a ton of preschoolers. So we talked, can we bring it into iVisions, or maybe just Excel could meet our needs? And we're gonna move the billing and the recording of the deposits over into finance and out of the preschool, because it's really not their wheelhouse.
And Linda, they talked about our timing was a little late. Was that related to COVID, would you say, or was it partly us, partly them? Was there some given?
It was all over, Susie. I don't want to really, I just want to say it's a team effort putting it all together. We were all in this crazy time, being short-staffed. We had a payroll person out on FMLA, and then also, COVID hitting too, and getting people not working 40-hour weeks over the summer hurt. But we made it through. And all we can look back is, let's just be better next year.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you already starting to address those items, Linda, and maybe we could schedule just sort of a mid-year update and just kind of look back at these and just see how we're doing and just keep it on our radar.
Okay, would you like me to work those updates with the FAB or bring it to the full board?
I mean, maybe, work on it with the FAB, but then give us just a report mid-year or something, just how those items that they've detailed are going, I think would be really great.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Great.
Dwayne, are you trying to talk?
I think he said agreed, Susie.
And I just wanted to ask, a couple years ago, we were late filing government forms and payments, and we were not recording home loans. Would any of that sort of stuff show up in this audit?
Hopefully, how about that? Ultimately our goal is to make sure the financial statements are materially correct and can be relied on. And as part of that, we're asking questions. Have you had communication with the IRS? Have you noticed, have you gotten any penalties, any late filings? And then we actually do, so kind of the older model of auditing was randomly sampling transactions. Much more of what we do now is kind of data mining. So you upload an entire database and then you look for keywords like penalty, or you can kind of look for, were all the payroll dates done within 3 days, or payroll deposits within 3 days of payroll, things like that. We could pull all your purchasing card transactions and we risk weight them and say, okay, is a purchasing card transaction that occurs on a weekend, is that a higher risk if it goes to a specific vendor? Say a liquor store vendor ID, we want to look at that and see what that's for. So that's much more of how we kind of handle it. I like to think that all those things would come out. We tend to put everything in the letter because I want to make sure that the board is always aware. Now, sometimes that maybe is painful. You guys maybe get more information than you want, but I'd love to guarantee and say yes, but I'd say it's a very strong likelihood it would.
Any other comments or questions from the board?
No, thank you for your work and your report. Oh, Dwayne, you're talking.
Oh, okay. Yep, he's talking. Look out.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Linda.
Yeah, Paul, thanks so much for you and your team for kind of plodding through with us on this one. Obviously, we appreciate the hustle.
Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, guys. Take care.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Judy.
Thank you.
All right, let's go back to the DAC update 5.1. Anybody from the DAC here? Krista or Jim Pomeroy?
Yes, both Krista and I are here.
Great.
Well, I think Krista's here.
Great.
Krista, are you here? Maybe not. But yep, there she is. Great.
Great.
Let me pull up our little report here that Krista wrote up for us. So we met last February 5th, a couple of Fridays ago. We had a presentation from the SAC at the high school. Sarah did it, and it was very thorough. An initial draft of the seniors exit survey was shared with the DAC membership for review and comment prior to our next meeting. I think you have seen that as well, Susie, is that correct?
Yes, I have. It's great. It's
Great.
a little long, and I hope that doesn't scare off our kids, but it's great.
Well, and it's a draft, so we can always fix that too as well. So we heard an update from Theron on the IB program as well as the UIP, and we were invited to attend the principals meeting with representatives from the state regarding creation of the UIP on 2/12. We are excited to get started with SIPs and UIPs in this upcoming few months, and I think that's an exciting process. We had a short discussion on CMAS, and although a formal vote was not taken, we did have consensus on the BOE proposal to support no CMAS testing this year, but to continue to offer high school testing, including SATs. That's pretty much a summary of what we discussed. Any questions or any thoughts or any ideas that you all have for us?
I have a question. The statute, and we can always make exceptions to the statute, but it's supposed to be what we kind of follow, says that the chair or co-chair of the SACs should be, same as the DAC, should be a parent. do we have a parent who's chairing this high school SAC?
I don't know. Sarah, do you know?
We didn't really have any official takers, but usually Anna would, just because she's on the DAC as well, she's kind of been able to give that, pay attention to that and share the information.
Chris, how about Chris? Do you know if there's on your SAC?
Yeah, we haven't had a designated lead person, so it's basically been, you know, who's ever present and can make the meetings is taking that on.
This is Kristen. I've usually gone to the elementary school SAC, and I'm part of the DAC too, so I've done that as well.
Well, and I also think most of the SAC members, tell me if I'm wrong, it's mostly parents as it is, isn't it? Chris and Sarah?
It's parents, a couple administrators, as well as a couple of teachers at the elementary school.
Yeah, I mean, Jim, we have to have, a community member. Then we also need to have parents and a teacher and administrator. So we have one community member, and then the rest are parents, and then one teacher, and then me. We keep it pretty small.
All right. Liz, do you have anything to add to that for middle school SAC?
Our SAC is made up mostly of parents. We do have 2 teachers that joined, and they're also on the DAC. So, but we do not have a specific lead person for the SAC.
Does that answer your question, Susie?
Yeah, and yes, it does. And how about a community member at the middle school SAC? On the middle school SAC?
We do have a community member who is a former parent. And yeah, that's, if that counts, she's our community member.
That's fine. That's fine. And Chris, also at the elementary level, is there a community member?
We don't have a community member, no, Susie.
They exist. That's an improvement over past years. So they exist. So it's a work in progress. Thank you.
We would welcome one. Yes.
So Susie, the statute, you read the statute, and it requires the leader of those SACs to be parents to set the agenda. Is that?
It could be co-chair or chair. Yes.
Well, that's a statute. It sounds like we should try to make that happen.
I think the fact that they exist is a huge improvement over 2 years ago or even 1 year ago. And I think that they're moving towards that, and I hope that they continue to move towards what the statute suggests, because I think they had a reason to put that in the statute. You know, they wanted teachers on it, they wanted community members on it, but it's really but it's supposed to be chaired or co-chaired by a parent, and that gives it a certain flavor, parental kid concerns, and I think we should try to follow that.
I think that's a good suggestion. I've made myself a note, and we can talk about that some more. Anything else for us to be thinking about beyond, like I said, our main focuses right now are the surveys, and then SIPs and UIP.
Do the exit survey?
I just had one. This is Krista too, and at some point we usually.
Krista, you're going in and out.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Sorry, Susie, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just was going to ask, we usually have a work session with the board too, and I don't know if that is on the schedule at some point in time or when that might be able to occur.
Do you have a time in mind that you would like? And we could ask Eliza to sketch it in.
Well, I just kind of feel like in some ways we like Jim said, we have the UIP and the survey, but we may need a little help with some further direction. So potentially sooner rather than later, depending on what your time frame is like at the board.
So maybe Eliza, we could look to try to put that in March.
Yeah, and just to confirm, this is for a DAC work session.
Yes.
Maybe we can combine it after the first DAC meeting of the month in March. So we can kind of combine on the 15th of March to kind of have a little work session with the DAC along with a little an update from their 5th meeting. Does that work?
Krista, sounds good to me.
That sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, we'll put in some more time for that.
Okay.
Perfect.
And then I had a quick question about the survey, the exit survey. So that's for graduating seniors. Is there, or is it in the works to do another survey for first year out, kids who are graduates who are in their first year out?
Thank you. So this is Krista again. I did ask for some feedback from our DAC membership, including, you know, people that just had kids that were graduating, to kind of look at those questions and then help maybe come up with some more open-ended questions. So I'm hoping at our next meeting we'll have both drafts of an exit survey as well as a postgraduate survey to review.
Great, thank you. Sounds awesome. Any other questions or comments? All right. Thanks so much, Jim and Krista.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We will now go to what looks to be very exciting, 5.2 academic update. Is that Dave?
That would be Theron.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Very excited. Just we'll be doing try to do this as you know, at least quarterly, so you get an idea of how we're doing with our grade data. Eliza's going to drive this, and just for the format tonight, just so you know, I'll be doing some initial thinking around this, and each principal will be presenting their own data. Please, at any time, if you have questions, just stop and we can do this. But Dave only gave us 30 minutes. I just want to point that out there, but we can always extend if you have those questions. So let's just start off. I threw a few things into an executive summary that I just wanted to talk about to make sure that some of this criteria was known by the board. And just first of all, when you take a look at the data, the great thing about it as you go through it, you're going to see that we're seeing growth across all of the grade levels. So very promising data from that perspective. Now trying to get perspective on typical, atypical, those sorts of things are tough to figure out, but I'll let each principal talk about that, but very much a positive trend in all directions. In addition to that, one of the things that I think have all of us concerned are those students that aren't making progress, and what's happening with them, and what kind of safety nets are in place at each of the schools to make sure that it happens. I know that every school has a pretty robust MTSS program where they identify students that are hitting those markers, whether identified by STAR data, but a big chunk of that is also figured out through attendance data, teacher reports, and counselor recommendations. Just know there's a lot of people looking at that to make sure that those students have a chance to get extra resources should they be working on this. Another thing that's happening, I just thought I'd throw this in here, we're beginning to work on a K-8 literacy resource. So that's something that a team has put together. Mr. Bass and I are talked about that today, in fact, and we'll have members of a middle school team, his SWIFT team, starting to examine some of the work that was started last year around literacy resources. So just know some of the things that we've identified from our preliminary data has just really focused our work in that area. And I know that that's something that had been identified in previous years on the CMAS, so we're working towards that as well. I do have to report this: state assessment is moving forward as planned. There's still a CMAS. We are still testing. I still have to attend the district assessment coordinator meetings. All of that stuff is full steam ahead. The state, despite rumblings from the Colorado Association of School Executives, the CASB groups, the Association of Superintendents, all of whom who have chimed in against the idea of a state mandated test this year, and even our own DAC on CMAS has chosen not to do this. However, the state is full steam ahead. And my last conversation with Sarah, who's in charge of CMAS, another Sarah, that she 100% said that they're moving forward. So we are assuming that everything is mission critical and move forward, we're still completing our access testing, which is a test for our English language learner students. They're finishing that up now. We're starting to receive tests back from the elementary school. So that state testing is moving forward. Just a reminder about today's report too. Just remember, first and second grade is not included in the STAR data piece that's state benchmarked against standards and the criteria it's referenced. I just want to let you know that that's not there. Just want to make sure that caveat's there. We said that last time. I just thought it was important to emphasize that again. They're going to be presenting DIBELS data today around that. Each principal is developing a much more comprehensive data analysis with their staff and creating a much stronger data culture. I think we're seeing that in all the leadership teams, and we're seeing that across the board of full-blown presentations. I think I know that Sarah and Becky have done the STAR data presentations at the high school. I know Chris is very steeped in doing the DIBELS reading data with his staff. And I know at the middle school, Jason, I believe it was last week, did a presentation on what the SIP goals should be for the school, and kind of started doing some of that root cause analysis with his team after they had a meeting with the staff. So I just across the district, we see our staff looking to be a little bit more interested in how this data is being accessed and used, and how it's used now to inform decisions. And finally, it was mentioned a little bit earlier, but just a big thank you to all that were able to attend last Friday and be a part of the school improvement planning meeting and the unified improvement planning meeting. I think a big part of what we're trying to do as a system is really starting to see that alignment. We see that from multiple initiatives that we started this year. You know, the K-8 literacy is one, but obviously the IB, all the things that were identified in our curriculum audit that says that we need to have a unifying philosophy. We're carrying over that same work into the UIP process to make sure that all of us are aligned in how we're moving forward with that, and making sure we're capturing some of those goals in that work. You can go ahead and move the slide forward, Eliza. Just some of the things that we could say specifically about this, and this is a slide I borrowed from our representative. Her name was Erin Lofton. She heads up what CDE's contingent for the school improvement planning group. She did a great and comprehensive job of going over every facet of this plan from a very high level. And I think that we just wanted to make sure that if we're going to go through the work of doing this planning process, it's going to be something that would be used with efficacy, and not just something that's done remotely, but that we do actually involve each school community in a robust way in getting this process done. And we think the data work that we're starting here today is going to be part of that body of evidence that we use for the school improvement planning process. So just know that that's going to be happening. We're identifying areas that other areas that can be a part of that. And so just to let you know, it's not always just assessment data. There's places for us to be using some of the social emotional data, some of the attendance data, some of those other things that can be very germane to that. That's also going to be a part of that. And I just want to let you know, there's going to be a change in how the timeline works for school improvement planning. As you guys know, the school improvement plans are typically due in April, which they are again this year, and we're planning on submitting around for that date. But the great thing is they've now changed the submission date to an October date. So that means that instead of having a plan for the year when the year is already over, we'll actually be using a school improvement planning process that begins at the beginning of the year, and it can actually inform our practice throughout the year. So that timeline shift has occurred, and I just wanted to let you know that. The other thing that was really a central theme of our conversation that we had with the planning process in our talk around this data at each school is this idea of going from compliance to aspirational. And I think that that's really important to have that kind of philosophy embedded in what we're doing. Just meeting state targets, meeting state benchmarks, well, laudable and great, and something that you want to see. That should not be where we rest or where we want to stay. And so just really making sure that any of our goals as a planning team are aspirational. So just kind of a 40,000 foot view there. And just again, a couple reminders about today's presentation. If you could go to the next slide. And Eliza, yeah, just it's criterion reference versus a norm reference test. Remember, we are using the state benchmarks for this exam. You'll see that noted as we go through the process. And finally, before we turn over, I think who's first, it's going to be Sarah. If you can go to the next slide, Eliza, this is the benchmarking levels for you guys just to refer to. And I think that most of them are included on the slides, but in case you forget, that's how we determine proficiency levels. So you guys can all see how that is broken out tonight. So I'll leave it to that. Unless you guys have any questions about some of those premises, we can go ahead and get started with the data presentation.
Also, Sarah, I just want to note, Sarah and Becky had to pop off real quick. Could we skip to middle school and then they should be back shortly.
Yeah, but can I
That's
ask
fine.
a question of Theron?
Sure.
You mentioned that you're seeing growth, which is awesome, across the board.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned compliance versus aspirational. Would you say that our level of growth is aspirational across the board?
Not yet. No, I would say that we have miles to go before we sleep here. And it's not that we're not doing a good job and people aren't making progress, but I think what we want to see is really hitting some levels beyond just a state target or beyond hitting the national average or being proficient or advanced proficient. We were talking about that as a UIP planning process. Even when you hit the performance range on the school performance framework, it's not necessarily meaning that you're meeting all the standards. And I don't think people understand that often when they're looking at that data. So that was one of the conversations that we had around it, Susie.
Thank you. And my other question is, in recent years, we were told that actually an interim superintendent wrote the UIP and actually wrote the middle school SIP, and we just want to know that's not really happening anymore.
No. So actually each school will be responsible for their own school improvement plan this year. And we're hoping to have our first draft. And here's what's great, believe it or not, we can have kind of a rough draft in April this year, and then we should be able to work on it this summer and actually submit our final copy in October. Does that make sense? So that's what we're trying to figure out. We want it to become a living document. As things change, you can update your school improvement plan. It shouldn't be something that you wait for the due date to come around that you start on the work. Hopefully this would be something that you do with your leadership team and your summer planning processes and those sorts of things. That's why I'm very excited that the due date's been moved to October. I've always wondered why it was in April, because when you think about it, if the plan's due in April for the previous year, it doesn't make sense. And the reason why they did that was she had a great explanation. I'm not remembering her specifics on it, but she explained why the state did it that way. It was more about state compliance than it was about being a rational plan for a school. That's basically the gist of it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Eliza, do you want to go ahead and move to the first slide? Thanks. So our first two slides focus on achievement. The first one is reading and the second one is going to be math. And with achievement, what we're looking at is in the green, if our students are at or above the state benchmark. And we want to see improvement. So the first columns, which accidentally include 9th grade and should not. So you can disregard that end column. At any rate, what we're looking for is from fall to winter, we want to see that our students have improved at their achievement in terms of those state benchmarks. So you can see with the green is level 4, and the orange is approaching. So one would hope that by the end of the school year, this is grade level specific achievement. So you would hope that by the end of the school year, the majority of your students would be in the green, which would indicate that they were at or above the state benchmark. In terms of our COVID situation, we're happy to see some of the improvement in that achievement. You can see that the dark red sections have become a little bit smaller. So we're seeing some increase in achievement. This is the reading. So now, Eliza, can you go to the next slide, and that will be math. Our math, we don't have as much of that really nice green that we want to see. the orange is approaching the, so we like to see the improvement from the red on one side, the one side, which represents fall, to orange on the right side, which represents winter. But obviously this is telling us that there's work we need to do in the arena of mathematics. We can look at curriculum, we can look at professional development, and we can look at some of our practices that focus on the state standards, because that's what this measures, is achievement on those, based on those state standards. So go ahead to the next slide. The next two slides are going to show growth, and growth kind of answers the question for teachers, did my students grow? So the first column on, or the columns on the left were in the fall, the columns on the right are winter. And with our reading, we are seeing that compared to their peers nationwide, our students are growing at a positive rate. And again, you know, I feel like some of this data is really fruitful, given that we have been teaching and learning remotely for so long. So we're glad to see that there is growth from fall to winter.
So if just help me understand this, Liz. So of all the students in the database taking stars in those grade levels, this compares our students and how they've done to them, and then classifies them as high growth, typical growth, or low growth?
Yes, it's comparing to their peers nationwide. And so this is the expected growth to other students in the same grade level. And yeah, Darren, do you want to add to that?
So what's the split look like? So this is pretty interesting to understand how we're doing relative to the rest of the country. In other words, what's the split look like, or what's the distribution, the average distribution, or some kind of comparable that we could look at for, you know, like similar demographic schools or something like that? I know it's kind of tough with Aspen. We don't really have a lot of similar demographic schools, but.
Right, and Jonathan, they'd have to be willing to share and publicize their star data with us too. That would be it, other than having it like this, unless it was on a school performance framework that's published, it would be tough for us to get that. I'd like to see that too, to see some of their internal benchmarking data, like what we're doing here. You know what I mean? That would be interesting. But I think what was really encouraging when I take a look at the middle school growth data is it's definitely trending in the right way. And I think when we looked at the data across the board, we saw that. But now the question is it to what degree, and is it matching what we would expect from a high achieving district? And I think that those would be two questions that you're wanting answered, that I don't think that's going to tell us that we'll be able to discern from tonight.
So one thing I'm confused about here, a percentage of students at or above the 35th student growth percentile. So is this only showing a portion of the students, or is the 35th growth percentile some bar here, like that's typical? What does that, the heading mean?
My understanding, I was trying to understand that as well, Katie. My understanding is that the district can set that bar, and that's the sort of, you could set it at 35, you could set it at 40, but that is where we want to see sort of the minimum growth is from the 35th percentile. So I don't know if that means that then we're only seeing students that are in the 35th percentile and above. I can't answer that question.
Okay. So we don't really know what the data is. We don't know if this is all the students or not, or if this is just.
No, this is, so from my understanding, when we took a look at the number of students that were tested, this is comparing kids that were in that percentile of growth to a typical amount of growth. And I think that what they're saying is, I think there's a threshold that you have to do. Like for the state, it's the 50th percentile. I think what they're using here is the minimum threshold is the 35th percent would be a typical, or below that would be low. I think all the students tested, it would be in there. For example, the middle school had 427 students test. So everybody was tested in this round. And the problem is they try to compare not what needs to be happen in order to have the growth score. You'd have to have the student have tested both times in order to have that. So there would be some students that would be not included in that data if they only had one score.
Okay, so you think that it's every kid who had 2 tests is in this?
Right, right.
And so the 35th percentile is where the light green starts? That's typical growth? Is that what you think? Am I understanding that?
Yes.
Okay, but aren't we doing half a year when we did this? So why 35%?
I'm not sure. I'd have to figure out that answer.
Okay. I'd love to understand it because of like not knowing what the metrics are, it's hard to know what the data means.
Okay.
But I do like the fact that we have a chart that's national, not just Colorado.
Right.
That's
well,
good.
and I think these are growth, and I'm not sure how they're doing the algorithm for growth. We'd have to, I mean, that's probably a deeper dive than what we're presenting here. But I think this is just kind of just to show that if compared to a normed data, this is where you would be. But I get what you're asking. I know what you're asking.
And I had that question about every school. So talking about this once is good. Maybe if you wouldn't mind following up with us on what this data means, that would be helpful to me.
And Theron or Liz, the columns second to the far right in each of the foursome. So the third column basically in each of 4. I don't see growth. I see the red is a little bigger on the right, and I see the light green is bigger relative to the dark green getting smaller. So that doesn't look like growth to me in that grade.
Yeah, that one is more stable, I'd say. I think the red is pretty much the same. It looks like it's 33.7 on in each of the red categories.
Right, but then the dark green gets smaller, so it's not really
gets smaller. Yeah, and the light green gets bigger. So,
well, but then you compare that to 2 slides before, which is a math proficiency. Oh no, sorry, that's reading. So compared to what's going on prior, which should be all the data, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's the achievement data, correct.
Yeah, so that should be correlated.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't appear to be, because it appears there's, well, it's hard to see.
I'm not sure that they're correlated. I've sat and tried to read the manual for this STAR to figure out, they have a lot of different reports that you can pull up. And these are the 2 reports that we chose to show. One, because we thought that achievement would help us understand it's linked to the to CMAS scores. And so we thought that would kind of help us understand where we are in terms of the benchmarks, the state benchmarks, and the growth we thought would be a good indicator of where we are from fall to winter. And, you know, fortunately it's not sliding terribly, but you're right, there is some.
Can I ask one question just to clarify, because I can't remember what the answer was the last time we saw this, which is when the levels are, you know, for a 7th grader, is the level for on grade level that they're measuring against the same at the beginning of the year as the end of the year? Or does it change as their expected growth in terms of what on grade level is from beginning, middle to end? Do you know what I mean? Like if they're at 100, just to give a random number, if they're at 100, if the average kid to be on grade level is at 100 at the beginning of the year, are they at 100 at the end of the year? Or is it 120 because they're expected to get growth throughout the year? Is the bar they're being compared to moving through the year, or is it the same and just a endpoint for the end of the year?
So from the standpoint of, like, if you're doing the norm referenced, it could move based relative to the performance of other students. If it's criterion referenced, it would be based to a criterion or a state standard or an anchor point, with it. So that's, does that answer your question? Is that what you're asking?
You're muted, Katie.
Sorry, I'm being too good with my mute button. So it grade 5, math, 3.9% are at grade level. And then at the middle of the year, we go to 7.9% at grade level. Is that the same grade level measurement, or does grade level get harder as you go through the year?
It would be the same grade level measurement. I see what you're asking.
Okay. So it's measuring at the end of the year grade level expectation.
Right, correct.
Okay, so, ooh. All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to go to the math slide now, Eliza? And so this, this again shows our growth from fall to winter. And you can see that the 6th grade did show some growth. The other grades are a little more stable. And the 8th grade had a little bit of a backslide with student growth.
So I think we answered our question, Liz, because there's no way 31.4% of 5th graders are at a high growth level and only have 3.9% at grade level. So this has to be a subset.
Katie,
Right,
though, it is possible.
But you could have high growth and not be at grade level. That's the issue. You could have high growth if the person had, if you're looking at their standard of where they started to where they ended with that, they could have a high growth level, but they're still not meeting the grade level expectation. That's possible, and that would take into account for the fact of the starting point of the student. So, for example, Olympian can jump, an inch improvement for a high jump for Olympians a lot different than somebody who's never done it before. And so that's kind of how they're looking at that. So if you have a high achievement level, you could have, and you had low growth, that could be a problem for that particular student. Versus if you have low achievement and high growth, that means that they're probably getting a lot out of the coursework while they're there. So I think that's how the measure is being used.
Okay, yeah, I'm just not necessarily believing it with the amount of red.
Got it.
Well,
I mean, as far as where we are with state benchmark, it's tough. I mean, that's we're not where we need to be with the benchmark.
The growth, I think, is compared to other students' growth, and it doesn't necessarily mean they're growing, learning the same material. They could be, learning more, but it might not be the same material that other students are learning necessarily. Right?
Well, is there a metric for what high, typical, and low is? Like, what does that mean?
Well, this is, I think, set so that typical growth is that you're learning better or more. You're growing more than the 35th percent of all students. So that would be typical. Lower, your growth is less than 35% of all students, and higher is above that.
And actually,
Meaning,
it's also your own scores. So remember that growth is about an individual student, and then we can get all of the data to come together and speak about, cohorts of kids. But ultimately, when you look at, you have via STAR, there are individual growth reports for every student that says, I started here and now I'm here. That has nothing to do with achievement. So I can start here and be at a 1st grade reading level in 9th grade and still make high growth. So they're going to be, those graphs don't have to match in any way, shape, or form. And then I just looked up because I was actually thinking, and I was asking Becky, and I have to say kudos to Becky. She puts the data together. So But the idea about the growth percentile from the STAR assessment, they basically are talking about it being typical growth is 35 to 65. And so again, I don't know enough to say if we go to the end of the year, is the typical growth going to be a higher number because we're just doing a mid-year. So like Theron said, I don't think we went.
This is test to test. And I know what Susan's talking about. So the way the state does the growth rate, this is probably where the confusion is coming in, is they look at kids overall and they say, this is most kids are, once they get an average of all the students and how much they grow, if you're in the 50th percentile, that means you have a typical year's growth. So they calculate it that way. What they're looking at here is improvement, I think, percentages over the first test to the second test with STAR growth percentiles. And that's a 35% would be typical, up to 65%, which would be high growth, is what I'm looking in their numbers here. So that's how that would be put together. And it's not going to necessarily match or correlate with your achievement data, because you have to make sure that all those kids would have two tests for one thing. So, and it's also going to be an average of those particular scores together for the overall, when they're trying to look at what the number of kids that took two tests in that grade level that had that type of percentage increase from one test to the other.
So will it tell you at the end of the year if kids have gotten a year's growth?
Oh, sure. Sure. We could say that if they had a high growth, we could anticipate that they would have more than that. If we had another measure, like if we were to do CMAS and growth there, we could take a look at that and we could anticipate that we would have a typical versus a high growth year with that other measure. And I think that that's the best we can do. And we try to look at multiple measures when we do it. And this would be something that would definitely be predictive for that. It correlates very highly to how we would do on the CMAS with a growth rating. So
am I right in reading this then that I'm sorry, I wish the reports that came out of STAR had bigger fonts. Sixth grade, we have half of our kids are not going to have a year's growth. Am I reading that right? But when I look at this, if they're in the red, it means that 50% of the kids are not on track to get a year's growth, or is that not, am I not reading that right?
Now, if you're using here's where it gets tricky. If you're talking about a year's growth as measured by CSAP, you could assume that if they're at a typical growth, they would have a year's growth on the CSAP. If not, you would assume they would not. And if that were to correlate, that would be how that could be read and interpreted. Katie.
Yeah, and then I would just add, I'm trying to sort of.
Is it maybe simpler to say versus this pool of students, 50% are not, more or less, are not having a year's worth of growth, as opposed to I'm trying to compare to CSAP and all that other stuff. It's just
the main thing is that it's a measure from one point in time to the next. So it's saying that those students that they're experiencing low growth from fall to winter. So as a teacher, you might see that data and say, okay, what are we going to do to try to enrich that curriculum so that we have greater growth? And then you would see from winter to spring, you would hope that with interventions in place, you would see an increase in growth. And I think that's, it's important to know teachers do use this data to think about how can they improve their strategies and their interventions for kids that aren't growing. That's a big red flag, obviously.
Well, in a normal year, from a parent/board perspective, I would also say, what are we doing, on the day-to-day, whether it's curriculum or, instructional aids, what are we doing that we're at this point that we need those interventions to get those kids a year's growth, right?
Right.
So that's what I'm trying to understand out of this, and I'm sorry I'm asking so many questions. I just don't understand what the data is, because it's a weird. I'm not sure we've seen this chart before.
No, we didn't do growth last time. We
Yeah.
decided to use the growth data because we had two data points to look at to see if we had some movement over time with that, instead of just looking at the state criterion reference benchmark data. So we thought we'd have a little bit more information here. And I think more than anything, it's just showing a directionality between the two tests that we're actually seeing improvement over time. And I think that that's really important for us to see. Now, to your point, are we achieving parity? Are we achieving aspirational goals? Probably not. But the great thing is we are moving in the right direction, and the instruction we're having is having an effect. If you saw a different relationship between the data that we presented tonight and it was inversely related to that would be troubling. That the instruction we had is not seeing those kind of that kind of growth, then we would see some problems with what we were doing instructionally. We'd have to take a real good look at how we're moving forward. Now, again, I think what Jonathan was asking for earlier and what you're asking for now is how would we do with a comparable district? I don't know how to tease apart that data, but I just wrote myself a note. That's something I think that's what you're asking for versus a norm referenced national grouping.
Aaron, can I say something too that might be helpful?
Sure, go ahead.
I just got some of the Renaissance stuff up. And one of the things that says, for example, is SGP, our student growth percentile, a 75 means that a student's growth exceeds the growth of 75% of students with a similar score history. So they're looking at all of the students with a similar score history in the state of Colorado. And if we have a student who has scored 50, they are achieving at or above that of 50. Sorry, I didn't say that right. Of students who are 50% of their peers. So did that help to clarify that a little bit?
Right.
You know, if they had a 35, they are achieving at or above students who scored or of 35% of their peers.
Because when they do the SGP, the growth percentile, they're looking at actually two things. They look at, if I were taking it, they would look at me in August and they would look at me in January, right? And if I had more tests, so if we do a spring, they can look at 2 prior tests. So it could be a fall, a winter, and then a spring. So you have that comparison. And then they take that and then they compare you to the growth of your peers to determine the growth percentile. So it's not just you, it's then in addition to the growth of your peers, if that makes sense.
So where we see 2 bars of red on the second test that are bigger than the bars of red on the first test, is that a call for all hands on deck? And are we going to use this to inform instruction and make changes so the red goes down? Is this going to be used to change what goes on in the classroom right now in February?
Yeah, I mean, I think I could say that what teachers think about when they look at this is, did my students grow? And if they didn't, then let's look at our curriculum. Let's look at the interventions that we're using. And let's change that direction. But definitely teachers are using this data to analyze what they're doing. And I think a lot of it has to do with
not only they're using it for the grade level teams. I know, Liz, we see this started being used for the grade level teams, and it's also used to assess individual students to see where they are. And I know that the teachers pay attention, particularly at AMS, just to make sure that they're doing the right things. And I can just say that's something that they should be talking about also at like parent conferences and those sorts of places as well. So it'll definitely be used, Susie. Probably not in the aggregate, but for the individual student.
Yeah. Instructional planning supports are a really great resource for our teachers because it really breaks down what were the skills that student was deficit in and what are they ready to be instructed on now. So those are things that we work with our staff to be able to see where we can identify the specific areas of need for these students to improve their growth for spring.
I want to know what 6th grade is doing. That was a huge growth in the number of kids growing. From what, 50 to, God, I can't read these stupid numbers, to 20% down in the red zone, and then similar achievement in terms of the the numbers, orange above. So, I mean, that would be interesting from a grade to grade comparison as well, what strategies are working.
Good point.
Right.
If there are no other questions, Theron, you're running this, never mind.
Here, go ahead. I think at this point, we'll just move on to the high school. Thanks, Liz. I think Sarah and Becky are back. We can do that. No, it's important for us to understand what all these numbers mean. And I was just looking at the growth percentiles and how Becky explained it is correct. If what exactly is the category there is determined by the percentile of growth. And so I just think just looking at that over time, it's definitely positive to see that. And I agree with you, Katie, you could draw some inferences from this data like you just did that could be very useful in doing that. Again, I would caution with any data report, always make sure you triangulate it. There needs to be a lot of skepticism when we look at it, just to make sure that it's doing the things that we want to do, but it's better than not doing it at all. And another thing I would say, just as a practice this year, doing a data deep dive. K-12 this is kind of new for us to be doing the quarterly reporting on this. So I think as we get better at this, we'll move it forward. And I think what we could do in the future is also maybe in the next report, just talk about instructionally what was done with that. I think that would be a nice feature to the report that the board would be interested in seeing. So, okay, Sarah, you're up.
Okay, and I've got Becky, my wing woman, in case I can't answer a question. But I think we've probably tapped into a lot of the questions around the data. But just to clarify, that first slide is achievement. So that is simply where a student was in August and where they are now. So achievement, okay? And this is where we are comparing them, right? It's actually that norm referenced. So for that, again, trending in the right direction. I think one of the key things is to think about the levels of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The way we've looked at it is red is urgent, right? When we look at red and we see that there are, 3.2% of seniors who are in the red, we know who those students are, and we need to think about what they need to get out of the red. Similarly with the 9.2 of intervention. So we'd say urgent is the red, orange is, or the darker orange is intervention. And then really the orange kind of middle color, that's kind of on watch. So those are the kids who could reasonably with some thoughtful and purposeful interventions bump right up where they need to be in terms of grade level. So that's how we're using the data. And like I said, I think it shows that there have been gains for sure. And I think that's positive. Not perfect, when we look at, we have like 25% of 12th graders, right, who are not in the blue-green area. So that means we need to look at those individual students. And again, we don't want to look at just achievement, because we do have a lot of students. If you have an individualized education plan, if you are an English language learner, we are more concerned with growth than achievement, because you are starting at a different level. So something to think about there. So again, the data is trending. And again, remember, just one data point, one day, but it is at least trending in the right direction. Let's go to the next slide.
Sarah, can I just interrupt for a second? If we're looking at achievement and what we're really interested in is growth, what's the best way of looking at growth? Just comparing the first and the second test? Or?
No, I have a growth slide. So yeah, so achievement is just showing where are our students comparatively, right, in terms of their skill set. And then growth is going to say, if our students started here and they went to here, how much growth did they make comparatively? And that's where you get into that, the student growth percentile of 35 to 60, right? Typical growth. So we want to see kids making typical to high growth, not low growth, if that makes sense. And oftentimes, when we get to the growth slides, what can be really interesting is oftentimes it's the students who are going to have the highest achievement making the lowest growth. So they're already reading above grade level. And so that's something to be considerate of. You can be achieving really, really high levels, but then maybe you're just kind of staying about the same. And we want to be cognizant of that too. If you're reading at a really high level, we still want you to make growth and be off the charts. So, you know, and that's why the individual scores are really important, not just the big picture. And that's what we use at the building level.
Yep. Can I ask a question about that, Sarah?
Sure.
Does this STARS test cap out at a reading level?
It does. It does. So it'll say, you know, for reading level, it's, post-college basically. And so we have, you know, so for the handful of kids, and there weren't that many, I'll be honest, there were a handful of kids who were at that high reading level. Yes, they wouldn't get into that high growth because they're already at that top level. Other questions on that? And I can talk more about the growth.
Honestly, that also speaks to in the past, STAR hasn't always been used for seniors because of where it caps out, but we chose to use it this year because of the COVID slide and wanting to really identify where students are. So it becomes less beneficial to us for those high achieving seniors.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, just as I know we're not on the growth side yet, but maybe we could notate the number of kids that have, you know, capped out of ability to, you know, because they're gonna give your red on the growth as well, right? If they can't grow anymore because they're already, you know, capped out. So that might just be a data point to include in these results, just to be clear.
No, you're totally right. And we're going to talk about that with math in terms of achievement, just because we have some of those data points, but that makes a lot of sense and we can clarify that. And again, you know, STAR really, we can show you kind of, I mean, using it as this one data point is great because we've never done this before. And longitudinally, as years go, we're going to have this, we can kind of look at it. But also for right now, for us, it's really in-house, right? It's looking at those individual reports. I want to know why Sarah, who's already reading at a, you know, 6th grade level, is still making low growth. So that means we're having interventions put in place. And I think that's really how we're using the data. So Katie, you're right. We need to be clearer with you about specifically what all these data points mean. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So this is math achievement. And so again, trending in the right direction. And what I would say about this one with the math achievement. So this is where we get into, you can see how we had a bigger percentage of the level 5 at high achievement than we do now. And that's because any of our HL2 math students who were already at the 90th percentile or higher did not sit for this exam. And that's because when you're looking at the data, you're able to break it down about what skills don't they have. And it was about statistics. They were below grade level in statistics. They don't take statistics in that HL class until 2nd semester. So giving the kids this test was going to take away from instructional time, and it wasn't going to benefit in terms of instruction. So that's why they didn't take so that's why you'll see that the achievement number went down for 12th grade.
Are they pulled out of prior years in the, oh, never mind.
I just say that accounts for 44 seniors that we had not take it in the winter because they were 90th percentile or higher.
Yep.
But they took it in the fall?
Yes.
They took it in the fall, and then we identified all the areas where they were. So if they were 90th percentile or higher, we did not make them take it again because we'd already identified that statistics was the one area where they weren't above, you know, above that. And so there was no point to take it.
But they're shown in the fall data here. That's what I was trying to.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So they are shown there.
Yep.
And that's why it looks like there's a decline for seniors on achievement in the winter data. But you'll see in the growth data, it's only comparing the students who actually took the test.
Yep. So does that make sense? Okay. All right. So again, trending sort of in the right direction. So here, we can go to the next slide. So here are the growth percentiles by grade level. So here you can see that if we're thinking about fall to winter, the first column, 9th grade, you know, we're looking at about 22%, 21%. I should look at my own screen. I can't read those numbers either. 21% low growth in the 9th grade. So that means those kids have not made growth in that 35% to 60% of typical growth. And again, those individual reports would then be helpful for us. Is this a student who is already really high level reader, or is this somebody who's just kind of isn't making any gains? And again, that's going to be really individualized information for our students and our teachers. We will be giving out those individual growth reports at parent-teacher conferences in a couple weeks, because I think it is really helpful for parents and students to understand, oh, okay, I was here and I haven't really moved the needle. So what's going on? So I think that's helpful information. You can see that in terms of growth, we actually in 10th and 11th grade, you know, those are concerning, you know, just a little bit higher in terms of low growth. So we want to know what's going on there and looking at those individual students. And then, you know, our seniors actually, that was actually great data in terms of reading growth. Seeing that our students actually have made some gains from August until now. So what, and you know, that's also for us to do a data analysis. Why is that? Probably they're reading more than they did over the summer. That's a lot of it. And are they reading with intention? Did they spend more time and energy on this test? You know, we just don't know all of those details. And that's what our teachers need to look at, those individual reports to figure out what the general data means.
And I should clarify, we did have seniors take reading fall and winter, but it was the math piece that we didn't have them take in the winter.
Yep.
Can I ask one question before you get to the next slide? Is, do we have the capability, just kind of thinking ahead to the end of the year when we're going to do these, of looking at this data based on who is remote and who's in person?
Yeah, I mean, because we have a very clear list of who's remote and who's in person, so we could absolutely pull that as a data point. Yep.
I think it would be just an interesting exercise for, you know, how school might change in the future and everything once we're past this pandemic. I think it would just be interesting to research a little.
And our staff has already begun to do that with our grade data. So they've already kind of made that leap. But when we looked at, you know, the actual grades students received at the end of semester 1, one of the questions was to look at all the students who's in person, who's remote, and really think about, does that impact in terms of GPA as well? So I do think that would be a great data point. And I think it's easy-ish. I'm going to defer to Becky once we get the list of students and can create which students we're looking at. I think we can disaggregate the data that way.
I will say, when we did our building work on the semester 2 grades, there was a lot of surprise because kids actually, the inference that was made is that kids who are choosing to be remote are typically more of the self-motivated, driven students. And those kids were actually doing a lot better than we expected. People expected to see that they were remote and that those kids were really struggling. And that's true for some, but it actually surprised us for a lot of kids who are just choosing this to be a better learning environment for them.
So can I ask a clarifying question just to make sure I understand? The ones in the red have taken this test 2 times this year, and they're not making what we would call, at this rate, they are not going to be making a year's worth of growth unless we intervene with those people, right?
Correct.
You can predict that.
Yeah, they're not making, they're low growth. They're not typical growth.
So are we optimistic that with those the 33% in the 2 grades, that we're going to be able to double up and have them make a year's growth by the end of the school year?
We're always hopeful. That's the goal, right? Is that
that is our mission, is to reach their potential. So
right. I mean, ideally, Susie, every year a student would be making, you know, if they're on grade level, you'd be making at least a year's growth, right? If you're below grade level, we'd actually even want you to have high growth because we want to get you up to grade level. So again, for some of these students, they're already at grade level or above grade level, and that could be why they're not making a ton of growth. But yes, the overall goal for a really strong educational system would be that everybody, whether you are the highest achieving student or whether you struggle, that you are always going to be making, you know, a substantial amount of growth. So we need to be,
but keeping in mind that this test does cap out at a certain reading level.
Yep.
So for some of these kids, it may have been that they are really high readers and they're not going to show growth no matter what we do on STAR. So what we really need to do as a building is we have to go pull out who are the kids in that 33% and look at their individual growth reports and determine what it is that they need, because it could be a lot of our high kids that are skewing that down.
Yep.
So we need to dig deeper to figure that out.
And could you all maybe in a couple, maybe in a month or so, come back to us? We'd love to have an update.
Well, and I think like the data presentation you're getting tonight is a 40,000 foot view. And I think when we started it and we prefaced the comments around, there's a pretty robust MTSS system that uses this to flag. And remember, I cannot caution this enough. It's one data point based on 2 tests. And so it's very important to have that corroborated by multiple system checks and balances, because I can tell you how kids take tests sometimes are not the most accurate results that you can get. There needs to be other ways of verifying where they are. Now, if we saw those kids in that 33rd percentile that aren't making a typical growth, would that be a concern? Would that be something we would look at? Is that something a classroom teacher would pay attention to? Is that something administrative? Absolutely. Will we start to address it? You could probably do a deeper dive with each of those individual kids by talking to those grade level teams and seeing exactly what they're doing, some of the things that they're using right now. And I know that I know that this is happening at the middle school. They'll use the instructional planning reports that come from STAR. They'll take a look at what's happening mathematically with you know, those kids. What are the particular standards that they're falling down on, and they'll have a chance. And what's really cool is STAR will calculate that for them and give them a report on the areas that the student needs to be shored up and to get those growth levels improved. So you can use that instructional planning piece as a part of that. And I think, you know, that's something maybe, you know, I'll put that down in my notes from this meeting as well. We added growth over performance data this time. And so next time, maybe we add in what we did instructional planning wise with each of the reports too, because I think that's what you're asking for, Susie. Okay.
Yeah, and I would say,
That's a little deeper dive. That's a little deeper dive.
Yeah. And with the instructional reports, that's actually what goes to our teachers. And again, that's across grade levels, specifically for reading. We want all teachers to understand where students are in terms of their reading levels. So we definitely look at both. We want to look at proficiency and where they might have an area that they really need to focus on. And then we also want to look at growth. So do you have a high achieving student who's just kind of skating along? You know, if we want to be able to be at that point where we're challenging and growing every student. But if you would like to know actual numbers, Susie, about those students who are making low growth and what that actually means, we can get that. That's.
And I just want to make sure other board members are interested in this kind of level. Okay. Okay, great. Carry on.
Okay. All right, next slide. And then these are the math growth percentiles. So again, like Becky said, this is just students who took the test in the fall and the winter. So this takes out those 44 seniors that didn't do the test for HL math. So you can see the high growth and the typical growth, and then the low growth. So again, just like with the reading data, we're going to look at those students in the low growth and see what needs to happen. And again, what we don't want to, you know, forget either is typical growth is great, but you know, we want to look at all the data. We want to focus on the low growth, but we want to use all of it to inform our instruction. So,
Sarah, so the reason for pulling out those 44 kids was that the statistics is at the end of the year. So are we giving them this test at the end of the year?
We can. It was twofold. It was that statistics at the end of the year, so it was not going to inform instruction, and that coupled with the idea that Megan was going to have to give up 30 minutes of instructional time, and you know, minutes matter. So
those kids are done early though. IB exams are mid-May.
So if you want us to give them this exam in May, we can do that, and then we can.
I'm just curious. I don't know if the math caps out as well. you know, if you have kids that are taking BC Calc, if it's going to even show anything, you know, on that, I don't know if it does or
People want
not.
to remember that they were in the 90th or above percentile before even having the statistics. And so some of them were in the 98th percentile. I'm not sure there's a tremendous amount of value as far as utilizing that information as much as it is to report the information. So if you guys want that reported, absolutely.
The utilization would be for the next year, for the next batch of kids, right? Those kids are graduating, so.
Not apples to apples, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I would look to just for you guys to consider it, whether you think it's a good idea or not. I just think we need some assessment of, and maybe it's the IB exam and that's enough. I don't know.
I mean, the IB exam is going to be a much higher, a much higher level assessment of students' ability to think and do
Yeah,
that.
and
place to be big. Yeah,
they're a little bit more bought into the IB exams too. Just to let you know.
You
Just,
think?
I think that's you're going to get a nice
STAR exam. Exciting.
Yeah, you're going to have a very strong reading of student performance, I think, from an IB exam, and you get it international, and you get it at an international benchmark, so you can see exactly how they do in comparison to their peers worldwide. So I think, again, that's another one of those data points. What I would just do is just not. I caution the board from making too big generalizations based on 2 sets of data points with STAR. Definitely a great starting point for conversations for grade level teams. Great starting point for administrators to start looking at instructional programming. A great starting point for teachers to have a lead to look at the instructional planning reports. But ultimately, it's just data. We'd want to have other looks at other pieces as we're going through it. But it definitely is comforting to see the trend moving up growth-wise across the board during COVID and kind of a topsy-turvy instructional model. So,
well, I guess the question back to you then, Theron, is there a better formative assessment that?
Oh, there's lots better than this. But I think
STAR?
STAR's okay. STAR's okay. But I think that's one of the things we'll look at as we move forward. But right now, it's not bad. I mean, we're looking at, I think, around math and reading. I think it's going to do a very good job of doing an aligned standards look at how kids are doing in those 2 areas. But I do think that in addition to that, we'd like to see like some of the contents to have some of their own common assessment work that we could be doing. There's a lot of things that could be developed on the assessment picture on the curriculum side of things that I think that we'll be looking to do in the future. But again, as a dipstick on how we're doing, if kids are moving and trending in the positive direction, we're pretty happy that's occurring during these conditions. That doesn't mean that, again, that we're not being aspirational and looking at how we can improve, but it does look like the metrics are moving in the right direction at most of our schools. There are certainly some flags at some grade levels that we'd want to look at, but again, I do have confidence in the principal teams and their teacher teams looking at those groups and making sure that they're getting access to intervention if they need it.
And I think Dwayne had a comment. Dwayne, did you?
No, all good.
Okay, carry on, Theron.
I had a question, Theron. Do you have, is this being made available to students and parents in terms of?
So Jonathan, we give it out to students and parents at parent-teacher conferences. So they received it in the fall, and now they'll receive it again in the spring, so that they kind of know where their student is in terms of proficiency based on grade level, and then that's the achievement data, and then growth. So is your kid making those gains?
It's definitely part of conferences. Definitely going to be part of conferences. It'll be a part of any reporting. I think it's also used in almost every student meeting that we have that would be around anything from 504s to IEPs. All this data is always hearkened to when we're making decisions about students and moving forward in some of those other avenues where they're receiving support.
And I would say, you know, one thing to think about at the end of the year, just to be frank, I want to think about audience in terms of accurate data. Having graduating seniors sit down to take an assessment that is kind of for internal use, you know, they're going to fly through it. I don't know how reliable that data will be, because again, this is something that to them does not matter. And so I would just caution us, if we're really going to hold tight to the data, I think that the fall and the winter we can make that case. Spring, making kids sit for an exam after they've finished their IB exam when they have time. I don't know how much validity we'll have with the senior level data. So
That's fair.
Yeah.
Will we be using this though as part of the portfolio for kids that, you know, given everything that has happened this year, I imagine there'll be some that we might make suggestions about summer school, or perhaps there might be a party, you know, a number of children who need to repeat material from this year based on, you know, just everything in the last 12 months. Is this going to be part of that assessment?
absolutely. I think as we start looking at our summer school offerings and really thinking about, you know, literacy and numeracy, it won't just be about, you know, how they've done in their courses. It will be a combination of STAR data for those kids. If, you know, the PSAT and SAT data can help inform that as well. Because we're definitely going to think about summer school as that idea of not just of credit recovery at the high school, which means skill recovery. So that'll be a big push for this summer.
I'm also talking about the middle school and elementary school as well for, you know, but yes, thank you. All of that.
Sorry. I think I'm done unless there are other questions about the high school.
So, all right, Chris.
right.
Last to go.
Thanks, Theron. I just want to provide a little bit more context to Theron's opening remarks. So our teachers started probably earlier than we ever have, working on a plan to get the building open for in-person learning. So this started mid-summertime. It's been a physically and emotionally draining period for our faculty as they navigate the pandemic in their own families, as well as, of course, with our students and their families. There have been many bumps in the road, some starts and stops, and a lot of quarantining along the way. One of the things that was mentioned was these tests and how they are just a data point. One of the things I shared with the board on both testing periods, I believe, is that in a normal environment, we would not be testing our kids the first week of school, particularly our youngest students, or immediately after break. We've just found that what happens is that we tend to over-identify kids, but with the pandemic bearing down upon us, we felt like we really had to get the testing taken care of immediately, because unlike the other schools, we cannot assess kids remotely very effectively. Think kindergarten, first, second grade in particular. But I think what makes these numbers that I'm about to share with you really are encouraging is again, that it's been very, it's been remote, it's been in person, it's been hybrid. And while the discussion around the state and around the country, you hear things like a lost year, families and teachers have reported, and I think our kids and families have experiencing anything but that. The teacher leadership, the flexible thinking, the resilience demonstrated by our staff is truly second to none. So working under conditions that are considerably less than ideal, trying to stay connected with kids that are quarantined and learning remotely while also having kids in your classroom has been an additional challenge. And I just really want to applaud everyone at AES for really their focus and their passion. So I just wanted to share that with you. We can go to the first slide. I think you're going to find this considerably easier to navigate. I'll give you a quick walkthrough. The idea here, this is our DIBELS benchmark that we give K through 4. And it's a strong indicator of kids that are doing extraordinarily well and kids that need quite a bit of help. So if you look at this, you look at the beginning of the year represented in the 2021, and then the middle of the year, 2021. The idea and the concept is pretty simple. You want to reduce your reds and yellows, and you want to grow your greens and blues. In a typical year, we would hope to advance 80% of our kids out of the red category and get them closer to grade level. while also maintaining and or growing 90% of our greens and blues. So what this slide tells you is that for the kindergarten team has been able to grow their at or above benchmark kids by 8%. They've been able to reduce their below benchmark students by 12%. And then we're about 4% increase in the kids needing urgent interventions. So Eliza, if we go to the next slide. Similar situation, when you look at how kids came in, you know, at the 2021 benchmark represented by the BOI, a lot of factors at play: COVID, remote learning, summer slide. I mean, we definitely had our work cut out for us. And you see the first grade team's done a remarkable job by their kids that are well below the benchmark is decreased by 14%. Their below benchmark kids have reduced by 9%. And then they've, of course, been able to grow their at or above benchmark students by 23%, which is really, really impressive. Grade 2, a similar story. Again, the reds are down 6%, the yellows are down 5%, and they're growing their at or above benchmark kids by 11%. For grade 3, again, a slight reduction in our well below benchmark, kind of holding steady with our below benchmark kids. And then the kids that are at or above the benchmark are growing by a little bit, 3%. And our grade 4 team doing similar work, reducing their reds by 4%, reducing their yellows by 3%, and then growing that at or above benchmark where we want, of course, all our kids to be. Here we've got the STAR reading achievement for grades 2 through 4. And I've kind of highlighted what I think are probably some of the most salient points about this data. If you look at second grade represented in the far left, you can see as first year STAR readers, the team definitely had their work cut out for them with approximately 66% of the kids needing or being urgent or requiring interventions. Now, then have your eyes move over to the second grade and the winter benchmark. And you can see that that number is down by 10%. So they were able to, again, reduce the kids that were really urgent and requiring urgent interventions, reduce that number while growing their benchmark. So second grade had approximately 19% of their kids above the benchmark, and they were able to grow that 11% in just a few short months up to our winter benchmark. Third grade, which is represented by the graph in the middle, started off with 47% of their kids requiring urgent or interventions. They were able to reduce that by 11%, while also growing their kids that were at benchmark from 32% up 14% to 46%. And then in fourth grade, you see a similar story. Again, 29% of the kids coming in requiring urgent interventions or some intervention of some sort in reading, and then being able to reduce that by 11% while growing their at or above benchmark kids by 18% up to 50%. Math achievement, the story is, again, kids starting off, if you look at our first grade kids at about 68% when they walked in the door this year. Now remember too, this is their first time they've ever taken a computer test, our first graders. So they had about 68% of kids who really needed a lot of attention. They had 11.8% of their kids who were at grade level. And then if you look at the story in first grade at the middle of the year, they were able to reduce those kids that needed interventions from 68% to 36%, while almost doubling their kids that were at benchmark. In second grade, a similar story, almost 70% of the kids in that dark red or red, then looking over to the winter benchmark, having that number drop down to 50%, while they were able to grow their benchmark kids at or above from 9.2 up to 15%. And then we had in third grade, we had 63%, again, as they walked in the door in the fall. That number dropped down to 40% of, again, that dark red and red, which are kids that are require either urgent intervention or some intervention of some sort. And then you look at their kids that are at benchmark, they went from 16.3% in the fall all the way up to nearly 32%, which is almost doubling that group. Again, very, very impressive. And then lastly, on the math achievement picture, the story's been pretty similar. And I think we all knew this, that, the combination of a summer slide and an elementary school going to remote learning in March or early April, if memory serves me. And then the understanding of this group, that the kids that were suffering the most were the youngest kids, because it became incumbent on the parents to do a lot of the teaching while their students were at home, or certainly to guide them through the teaching. So fourth grade had 69% requiring intervention. They dropped that down 15%, and they moved their students that were at approximately 13% at grade level, and we're able to move that up to 15.2%.
Chris, I have what may be a dumb question, and any of the principals or administrators can answer it. Is the star aligned with the state, with our state standards? Yes. Okay. So this could translate, even though this is sort of formative, sort of a computerized assessment. I understand it's not totally considered a formative test by some educators, but anyway, we're using it as a formative test, correct? In this,
yes, and it gives us real-time actionable items to inform our teaching, both through the instructional planning forms that were alluded to earlier that STAR produces. And DIBELS does the same thing. DIBELS will hone in on an exact skill of a young reader, whether it be nonsense word fluency, letter identification. You know exactly how your kids are doing. And of course, when you're looking at the data and you see that there's a group that really needs a little bit more instruction in one of those targeted areas, that's how you have your small groups in the back of the room. So you can do your whole group lesson, but then you can go back with this other group and kind of revisit some things just to give them a little bit extra exposure, but very targeted. That what you're teaching them is something that is a deficiency, and it's usually not just one kid. There's usually several kids that share that trait or that deficit at that time.
And is the STAR aligned to all state standards, or are we lucky that it's aligned to ours, and so we can use it sort of to predict how we're going to approach the state test as well?
Yeah, it is. I mean, so in first and second grade, it's tied to learning standards, because those kids don't take CMAS, of course, right? So, but third and fourth is aligned to both CMAS as well as the learning standards for those grades.
Right, and it does align to Colorado academic standards. And so in Common Core, which is what the Colorado academic standards are based upon. So there's that genealogy where that's created, Susie. So yeah, and could it be used? I guess maybe your question would be, could it be used as a predictor or a forecaster of where we're going? You could use it that way. We could see how accurate it would be. Certainly something I'll be paying attention to this year if we end up taking CMAS. It's one of those things that we'd want to do. The great thing is just, something that we've done this year as a system that hasn't happened before is everybody's using it, and I think all of us have questions about lots of parts of this testing piece, but the great thing is at least we have a data set that we can start at a ground zero with, right before we're really looking at systems as disparate as grades, grade averages per grade level, some of those sorts of things. This to me will be a little bit more scientific and accurate, and perhaps a good predictor of how we would do on CMAS. I'd rather have this data to make the prediction than without it. Let's put it that way.
It's titillating. It would be a little more exciting if there was less red, but it's titillating data. And thank you very much.
Okay, so now we've got our star reading growth. I know we've talked a great deal about growth, but just to kind of crunch these numbers for you, in second grade, we've got 68% of our learners growing at typical or high growth, 75% of our third grade, and 68% on fourth grade. And another thing to note about growth is it isn't enough just to grow. And typical growth isn't going to close the gap if the gap is significant. You need to grow beyond that. And so our teachers know that. So it's you have to have that in mind, that you're not okay to just look at it and look at a snapshot and say, oh, typical growth is good, they're growing. Well, there's more to that story. You've got to dig a little bit deeper to understand what exactly it means for each kid.
So Chris, related to that, I have a question for you. What is your goal for these, end of year proficient, I guess level 4 and 5 on grade level at the end of the year? What kind of a goal do we have for the elementary school overall for each grade level?
I would love it if we could get kind of what I started off at the beginning talking about. If we could get 80% of our kids that were red out of the red, and if we could maintain and grow the other group at a 90% level, that would be amazing, Katie. And when you look at the growth and just the choppiness and kind of the, to no one's fault, somewhat uneven experience that I think everyone has kind of experienced. There's a lot of teaching and learning left. We got a lot of school left. So I'm very encouraged. And it was a kind of an interesting byproduct of the pandemic is that, the teachers reported to me kind of anecdotally that it really was until about December 1st. That's when I started hearing people saying, you know what, they're really getting it now. Now we really got our feet underneath us. Now we're really starting to make some progress. So it took a while, much longer than it has in previous years. So I just want to maintain that momentum and continue, again, to keep closing the gap where a gap exists, and continuing to challenge and grow our kids that are at or above grade level as well. That's very, very important to us and is always on our radar.
Well, it looks like you're making some good progress here. So it's especially some of these lower red rates in the growth. It's going in the right direction.
Thank you.
So nice job, teachers.
We've got one more to share, and that is again the growth numbers. So you can see here we've got about 81% of our first graders that are growing at typical or high growth, which is very, very encouraging. 69% of our second graders, same situation, growing at a typical or high level. 66% of our third graders, and then 55% of our fourth graders growing at typical or high levels.
Are we done? That was a lot. Do we ask
questions? Do you guys have any questions about the report so far, or anything that you'd like to see in the future? I know I really like the fact that we're doing this quarterly now. And obviously this is really just for you to gauge how we're doing. And we want to make sure that it's shaped in the way I've already written some notes from this one. Some of the things I think that we could do a little bit better is maybe share some of the instructional reporting that we do next time, and maybe a little deeper dive into STAR at the beginning of it, just so you guys can have a little bit of background around it as well. And then how each teacher might be using it, maybe some feedback around that too. So that might be something we can do in a future session. So that's some of the things I think that we could use from this, but I hope that you got the overall feel that I agree with Chris's last analysis there is, when we were looking at it, it was great to see things trending in a particular direction. It really was. And I'm also thinking that some of the work that we're seeing around the district around data culture is certainly improving with the school improvement planning process, and this will be a big part of it. So we'll see those sorts of nuances and literacies growing as we move forward. And to your point, Katie, is this the only assessment out there? There's a lot of them. So I mean, we need to figure out which one is going to match and which one is going to find out the things that we want to know most. But I think for a starting point, it's a great way for us to reference how we're doing overall.
So one thing that I think might be helpful is I felt like I spent a lot of time trying to understand what the growth graph was, and I apologize for that, but I didn't get what the data was being presented. So when we go through perhaps maybe some pre-work on when we're throwing out new data might be helpful, so we don't have to go through it in a board meeting.
Got it.
My apologies for that. I just didn't understand it.
Sure.
And then secondly, just looking forward to the fall when we do this, I want to make sure that we don't just look at a school to school, that we get the transitions. And make sure that we're showing 4th to 5th, and it shouldn't be. I don't think it should necessarily, as we're trying to go for a full K-12 experience and continuity, we should be looking at the data in that way as much as possible, I would say, to be consistent about that. And I think, by the way, it's great that we're showing consistent data now. I think that's wonderful. So thank you.
Great. We'll move on to.
I have just one question real quick. Thanks, everybody. That was really informative and helpful. And I really appreciated the sort of goals that or targets that you articulated along the way. And so I would love to see that, in a short term, like just along with the report, sort of like a short-term goal, a long-term goal or target, just so we kind of are looking at where we'd like to be and where we think we can get in a short time and maybe a longer time. That would be great.
I totally agree. It's nice to definitely have that dipstick. It is. Yep. Just to go back to what Chris said, what a remarkable year this has been. It's tough to. I'd be nervous about all of it. I think what we're going to be figuring out is how do we recoup any loss is what we're going to be looking at overall with this. Right. I mean, it's going to be a little bit tougher to be aspirational, I think, than we want to. But maybe the aspiration is getting back to parity, and that's where we need to be. Yep. So. I appreciate the time for the board. So thank you. And if you guys have any other questions, please. If you guys have other comments or things you'd like to see in future reports, just let us know. We'll make sure it's there.
Along the lines of what Susan said, we could even, if we wanted to, consider using some of these as new indicators. If we're not totally happy with our old indicators, our current indicators for our results monitoring, we could think about using some of this. Jonathan, do you have any thoughts, or Dwayne, any thoughts on that concept?
I would stick to the state standards so we don't have too many multiple sets of indicators. I think these are really good to inform instruction, but at the end of the day, I think we need to get back to the one standard, which is the state schools, and then not try to have stuff all over the place, because I think it just confuses things a lot. I think these are great tools to help the teachers, at least from my understanding and what I've learned about this stuff during the year, to track student progress and to orientate instruction and all of those things. But I think at the end of the day, what everybody's going to see is going to be our performance on the state standardized assessments, which is aligned with the Common Core, and that's what we're supposed to be teaching. So I guess that would be my 2 cents.
Dwayne, any
Of course,
comments?
the experts here are the ones, I mean, but that's just what I've gleaned from those, from my discussions with teachers about this stuff.
Yeah, I would agree. I underscore that. I think that's good counsel there. But I also think that I'm sure folks would agree with this, that this year is almost a bit of a cleansing year. It's an opportunity to kind of refresh and take some new perspective. And I think that's what you're probably suggesting, Susie, a bit of a, it's an opportunity to, in addition to sticking to that structure Jonathan just described and not getting too far afield, but there's clearly some things that are important, and this year has illustrated that. And then there's some things that are not as important, and this year's also illustrated that. So I just look forward to the opportunity over the next, obviously we have several years to tighten and structure and refine, but also simplify, so that we can probably spend more time assessing and deciding versus gathering and collecting.
Does that mean you're going to run again in November?
Oh, no, I thought you were. That's the key, that I'm just going to be your neighbor down the street cheering you on. Yes.
Yeah, and just always a cautionary note, whenever you do a data presentation, it's really important to measure the pig, but probably even more important to measure it, or to feed it. And so that's one of those things that
That's right.
we're always looking at, how the instructional picture fits into
Yeah,
what
exactly.
we find out. And so,
yeah, what do we do now? Right.
Yeah, what do we do now? That's exactly, those are the big questions, for sure.
So,
Dave,
good
did
stuff.
you agree with Jonathan's assessment to keep our indicators with state standards?
Absolutely. And I think that's kind of the key, is we have to know what the metrics are so that we can design around it. The state standards are what everyone looks at. When you think about Chris's presentation and all the presentations this evening, it's about alignment and it's about focus. And, Theron started out talking about, an articulated K-8 language arts curriculum. That's going to be huge. As we build a framework that pulls elementary in alignment with middle school, and our K-8 work is completely foundational work to tee up the high school for success. The more in alignment we can be, K-8, the more we can be sending kids into grade 9 ready to do high level work, right? We're not spending time in remediation, we're advancing the conversation from there. So we're really looking forward to robust conversations around literacy, around numeracy, around an articulated K-8 literacy and numeracy curricula. So that'll be huge. As Theron said, STAR is only one of several testing batteries. It's not bad. It's probably not the industry standard, but from a bandwidth conversation, changing horses midstream, mid-COVID especially, mid-administrative changes across the board on many fronts, it's probably not the time to make that jump. It's good enough for the work that we are trying to do right now. It's in alignment with state standards. It's alignment with state testing. It helps. Is it 100% accurate predictor for how we're going to do on CMAS? Not 100%, but at a high correlational level. Is the NWEA map at a higher level? Probably. But we're not using MAP right now, and it wouldn't make sense for us to upset that apple cart. As Theron said, and it's a classic educator pushback on testing. It's important to measure the pig, but it's more important to feed it. And what we really want to get to in these conversations is how we're going to really create a robust educational opportunity for every single kid in the Aspen School District, while providing the professional development for the staff to implement that robust educational opportunity. It's an exciting time to be in Aspen in these conversations. There's a lot of work to be done to get us into full alignment. Pre-K to 12. because as our initial audits have indicated, we've got some holes in our programming, and we want to fill those holes and really make sure that what we're doing is making sense for the kids in this district. On an individual level, very important that, yes, we can remediate, but yes, we can extend learning, and everywhere in between. So we'll get there. And, we're going about as fast as we can go on that work. So really, really good presentation. Thank you, principals. And thanks for all the teachers on here. We definitely know that this was a tough year, a lot of change, a lot of change. What's the word, Sarah? Pivot. A lot of pivots this year, and there's probably going to be a few more before this year's in the bag. So, but we're going to keep doing the right thing.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Shall we move on to 6.1 bond update, 10 minutes maximum?
Probably a lot shorter.
Good.
A couple of things happening there. We still haven't quite picked our owner's rep. We are working on that and should have that in the bag, as it were, by the middle part of this week, which would be tomorrow or the next day at the latest. Linda and I are making a few phone calls, hopefully tomorrow, to finish vetting our owner's rep candidates. We're also working on some initial actual property acquisitions in alignment with the bond goals of attracting and retaining our good teachers, good staff members. And Linda, what else? There's been so much going on lately.
I know, it's overwhelming. Now that our audit is complete, there's a statement that goes out. It's the preliminary OS. And so I can start completing that document with our last audit in there, and working with Dan O'Connell. So we're still on track to go to market around mid-April for our bonds. So I'll keep you all informed, as I get more information moving along on what the situation is market-wise.
And in the 6.1.1, it mentions a realtor that we're engaging. And I wanted to ask if, I know in the past, they gave a discounted rate for government, public entities such as us on their rate. And I just wondered if they're doing that again this time.
Dan, Dave, you want me to pick that up?
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Susie. It's a good entree and a segue there. Obviously, I want to take a step back. We want to briefly, as a board, just remind ourselves of our process and the roles that we have, but probably more importantly that Dave has as superintendent. Clearly, like as mentioned, the board, we have the community approval of the bond program, and one of the key tenets of the program, as we know, is attract and retain quality staff, and that's considerably levered by having an increased inventory of housing. So we occasionally, for everyone's benefit, just for the community's benefit here for 20 seconds, we occasionally have made acquisitions or developed our own inventory. And so we're going to do the same. We need to be leaning into this tenet, this priority here now, and start to show the community that we're moving forward on that particular front. So that includes the prospecting of partnerships and the prospecting of organic sites, but it also includes some acquisition. So I just wanted to put, a little bit of a reminder to the board. I think it's good counsel to have the superintendent seek out advice and have an advisor that can provide occasional input, but then also provide a brokerage services. And now coming back to Susie's comment, clearly we can have that conversation again. We used successfully, if you recall, recently with Blake Appleby. He helped us with the properties up in Old Snowmass, and that has been an important addition to our inventory. Blake has indicated his desire and willingness to continue on in that role. And we've been able to have him introduced over to Dave, and Dave's already developed a relationship directly. So I think I was just wanting to ensure that the two things. One, the board was aware and understood. Clearly, this is Dave's decision, but I think we can all agree that we support the forward progress there and kind of future planning and some near-term business, near-term acquisition. And in that light, there are some identified properties that the district might be able to secure. Obviously, it's premature to announce those addresses, but you kind of know the flavor. We're looking for close-in residential units that can immediately give us some benefit. And as Linda just described, the timing for the first issuance of bond proceeds, we can time that fairly nice. But we also have the structure that we put in place a few months ago, wherein we have a bit of a reimbursement policy and structure to kind of repay ourselves if we need the liquidity in the front end to make these important acquisitions. So I think we're all in good standing. I just wanted to kind of have that quick conversation with the board, make sure that any questions that need to be answered, we can get that done here quickly, and then allow Dave to run hard at it.
Okay, I only had one thing that I might add into the analysis. As far as acquiring, I understand we have a mix of free market and controlled housing. So as part of this process, Dave, maybe just think about if it's time to maybe rotate, or if we can rotate from free market to and take the opportunity to also raise some funds to then get into with either more money into some of these projects now that we have the bond money or whatever, but kind of set us up more in that category of employee housing, and maybe rotate out of the free market and take advantage of some fairly good market prices in the free market at this point. So just another thing to consider. Don't need any comment or anything like that, but just
yeah, good
Noted.
input. Yeah,
Noted. Yeah. So this
Anyone
is
else?
targeting for employee housing and with all the guidelines there. That's why an advisor would be very helpful, especially to a new guy to the Aspen market. Dan and I are happy to learn as much as we can about it, but it would speed up the learning process as well as help protect the district's interests.
If I may add on that quick point, sorry, Susan. Our owner's rep role will also be able to provide additional support and advocacy and just some additional legs, so to speak, over the coming months and years in this space. It's also important for the community to know that. So frankly, we don't interfere with the primary mission and business of the school district in providing educational excellence, but we could have some strong local and regional / national reps, fulfilling the bond goals and programs the community set forth.
Yeah.
Susan?
No, I don't have anything. I agree and I'm supportive.
Just one thing, which is I just want to make sure going forward, we are considering the results in terms of the mix of types of units that we find. And I know, opportunities will arise and it will kind of fit in the whole thing, but I just, want to make sure that we are doing that. And at some point, as we're considering potential build projects, that type of thing, that we, fill in where appropriate based on what we're hearing the needs are, and what we also think the needs are as folks retire and we need to replace teachers. So.
Yep. We are looking at a very diverse portfolio over the course of this next few years.
Cool.
Great. Are we ready to move on to 6.2?
Dave, you got what you need, right? In order to move forward with, reaching out and setting up representation with Blake, and then moving forward on some of that business?
I
Looking at
do.
some acquisition.
Yep, I believe so.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
A-
Thank you.
And I think I keep carrying on. We'll look to, if we're lucky enough to secure contracts, obviously in the short run, we'd be looking to president to sign contracts as part of our policy, but also to have plenty of opportunity for diligence, title, property inspections, appraisals, any other particular, approvals that we need to run through, just make sure that what we're buying is safe for the community. And then obviously financing contingency to tie it to the funding streams that Linda has set up for us.
Yep.
10-4. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, it's just time bound. So that's, appreciate Dwayne, you hanging in there and crossing that T and dotting that I for us. So yeah, definitely have a desire to keep moving forward on this as this is one of the high pressure points in our conversations with staff.
Great, thank you. 6.2 quarter financial report, Linda, or?
Yes, actually, thank you. And I have good news too. I do not think I'm going to need all 30 minutes of time. I think you guys have really had a lot of financial stuff thrown at you today. So included in this, inside the board doc is the audit that we just finished up in there, but I want you all to know too, I've already uploaded this information onto the district website. So it's all available and we're compliant with the state on our financial transparency. So then moving forward into our quarterly financials, when Paul was giving his explanation of school districts being so heavily salaried, our percentage is actually in this report. We are 84% of our general fund budget is salary related. So, obviously that's always the first thing I'm looking at, and we're trending in a very positive direction there. Although we do have some things that are a little worrisome, but not in total dollar. We have had some overtime expenditures inside of facilities that has been extremely large. They are, our facilities is just being pulled in 100 different directions right now, and trying to, meet all these standards with COVIDs and shutdowns and quarantines and housing, when employee housing stuff gets, they handle all of that. So you can see that's the stress on the overtime that's on the budget. And so I wanted to make you all aware of that. And we know, and we're monitoring it. And we know we're going to have to put some budget relief into that for them next year. And we're going to have to reorganize some stuff and do things a little different in our next financial year. But when I look down at the trending of our financials, there's not a whole lot that I want to point out, except for the very, I think, what page am I on? I'm like page 3, but you don't have to pull it up to look at it. But the cash balance, because that's really what I'm monitoring very closely right now, because we have the 0 interest loan program. And then also we're going to have to fund possibly for maybe a week or two the properties if we end up doing closing before we sell our bonds. So I'm monitoring that really closely. We did receive our first payment of some people that have paid their taxes early in February. We received that, but this is when we start becoming flush in cash. These are the fun times to actually see the deposits come in cash. It like makes a smile on everybody's face, it's like, oh, finally we have some cash in the bank. And things seem to be trending typically. So I don't have anything to report over, people paying a little slower or a little different on cash. It looks like it's just moving right along on there. I did include in this report a preschool and lunch program, and you can see we knew when I did the mid-year budget, it was not pretty, and it isn't pretty, but at least we know we have a problem and we have time to look and adjust and think of different options, to maybe help alleviate those funds. I do want to point out that both the preschool and food service, in the way we report our financials, is inside of the general fund. So it's like a sub fund there. So it has the mothership, if you will, watching over it, so it doesn't stand out and go any red flags out to CDE reporting, because it's all within inside the general fund. And then school activity is trending a little low too, but that is, we collect revenues and we pay it out. So it's an in and an out. So we're collecting less, but we're spending less. So those things are moving along. And I think on that note, I'm just going to open it up to any questions, or and please, Phil, if you think of something later, you're always welcome to email me on something when you're looking through this and think, gosh, I wanted to ask that, but didn't have a chance to. So.
Any questions?
I'd only add that it's not really a question, it's just a supporting comment with Linda. Obviously, the cash flow and the cash flow curve that you referred to, Linda, that's internally consistent with, the historical pattern, not only of this district, but of many. And I know you said that. I just want to make sure the community sees and understands that. Folks that are looking at the report might, lose their lunch, but it's like you said, there's a consumption, and then we have just a big slug of tax proceeds in the next 90 to 120 days, and that's all good. And then we run it out through the course of the balance of the year of any given year. And obviously the stresses that we saw in terms of the lack of, participation in preschools, and as you said, on the student activities, those are all kind of COVID driven extraordinary events, and we're doing our best to mitigate, but whilst at the same time keeping, the team and keeping organization together and afloat and repurposing where we can, and helping out with facilities, et cetera, just kind of nimble stuff that you do from the finance side. Yeah. Thank you.
That's great. Can we move on to, thank you, Linda. Can we move on to superintendent update? And Dave, do you really need 30 minutes?
No. Maybe 4. And Eliza, if you could share your screen. It's going to be very, very brief. As you can see, 3 slides. First one's the intro, which is less than 30 seconds. We're going to share a short video with this group here that is going out to the rest of the community this evening. Here we go. Get your popcorn.
Let me know if you guys can hear this when I start.
Greetings, everyone. It's Dave Baugh, your superintendent, and it is great to be back with you. I had the opportunity to spend the day over at the music tent in the parking lot, wound up volunteering all day. And, I just want to say thanks to everybody who made today happen. Just about every single educator in Pickens County had the opportunity to get vaccinated. And I just believe it's a total game changer. So I just want to thank everybody who, has made that happen, from the sheriff's department to, the emergency management team to Aspen Valley Hospital, and countless more volunteers. Mountain Rescue was there. It was just fantastic. And what an incredible vibe. People lining up sometimes for 50, 60 minutes to get an inoculation. And yet everybody was happy. So, boy, I just want to say thanks to everybody for making that happen, for our teachers, and especially for our kids who are going to benefit the most from this, because it really helps us get back to in-person learning. Please remain vigilant. Please continue to wear your masks. Please continue to do the social distancing, washing those hands, keeping them away from the face. That's huge. It's been a long haul to get here, and we're really grateful. Take care of one another. Thank you.
So, yeah, we shot that last Friday. And a startling surprise that we just didn't expect to have happen. Anyone who did not get vaccinated last Friday has the chance to get vaccinated again this Friday over at the music tent. We've sent out the link to everybody. and even our colleagues at the community charter school, a couple of them didn't have the opportunity. So vaccinations are continuing to move forward. Also wanted to say that we are continuing our testing. We've moved it to testing Tuesdays, partly because it has a much better ring than testing Wednesday. But it's all part of that layered mitigation. And one of the things that we found is that even with vaccinations and even with testing, we do have to continue the layered mitigation approach. So we are doing the best we can with our social distancing, the 3 to 6 feet, Paris CDC guidelines. We're continuing to work with our contact tracers, and there's a good reason to think that COVID is going to be with us through the end of this year, into next year, and it may become, just like the flu, where we have to get an annual flu shot. And that's just the nature of it, but it's a little too early to tell just yet. But we have to continue to implement our layered mitigation strategies. This district has been aggressive on creating those, and so we need to continue to implement those. And Linda referenced how hard our facilities crew has been working. Our schools are the cleanest they've been in a long time, and the men and women in the facilities department continue to work really hard, really diligently. And so big shout out to Jorge and his team for helping us here. And then, Gabe Muthing of the incident management team in Aspen has just been phenomenal. We've been working closely with them to make sure that our folks are getting those vaccines. So that's kind of where we are in the vaccination and testing. It does take an inordinate amount of time to pull this stuff off. And so thanks to all of our team here. Eliza has been instrumental in helping us move this forward. Elise, of course, our nurse, working tirelessly and often through the weekends on this stuff. So we're looking forward to the good weather getting here in a couple of months after we get several more dumps along the way, I hope. But, spring's coming, summer's coming, and so we'll have lots more fresh air to help mitigate as well. And so there's that. I'm going to kick it to Dan to talk a little bit about the middle school principal search. Dano, it's all you.
Everybody. Thanks, Dave. Hey, everybody. Good evening. Just a quick update here and an announcement. We'll be going out to campus tomorrow. The search committee has whittled down the pool to 3 finalists who we have invited to visit campus this upcoming Monday, February the 22nd. So we're just about wrapped up with travel arrangements and lodging and all that for the candidates, and we'll be sharing itineraries and applicant materials, cover letters, resumes, that sort of thing with campus hopefully tomorrow, along with just a brief overview of kind of what the day is going to look like and an invitation to fill out a survey if folks would like to participate in various aspects of the search. So high level, variety of different stakeholder groups spread throughout the day. The finalists will go through a bit of a marathon, as you might expect, presenting to different groups, answering questions, that sort of thing. It'll be a mix of small, socially distanced, safe in-person kind of interviews, and then in the afternoon, largely virtual large group meetings with staff, students, and parents who want to participate. We are also going to try and have the large group meetings recorded so that folks who cannot attend will be able to review them in person or review them after the fact at a time that's more convenient, as well as try and build some translation into there for folks who may not have English as a first language. And then as all that kind of wraps up, there'll be a candidate survey that goes out that any stakeholder who participated will be able to fill out a web-based form that basically will collect some thoughts about each of the candidates' strengths, weaknesses, and whether or not they would recommend them for hire, as well as kind of just a general ranking in terms of how they thought each performed. So much more comprehensive information very soon.
Thank you, Dan. And that concludes the superintendent's update.
I have a question of Dan. Dan, maybe I missed it. Did you say who all does the survey to participate go out to? All middle school parents, all students, all teachers? Who does
That's a great question. And to clarify, it will be anybody who participates in a portion of the process. So for example, as we're thinking about setting up large virtual sessions in the afternoon, that survey will go to anybody who is in attendance at one of those sessions. So in other words, we want to make sure we get the survey to folks who participated and don't just blast it out so that anybody can fill it out. But yeah, so it'll be targeted to those who participate in some piece of the process, and we'll run that through HR.
Okay. Thank you.
You
And
bet.
thank you, Dave. Unless anybody else has questions, go ahead.
Yeah, I just had, how much of the teachers and staff, do we know what percentage got vaccinated, Dave?
We don't know exactly, but a lot. So, you know, there were 280 people on our official initial survey. We estimated 8 to 10% were opting not to get a vaccine for a number of reasons. We guided many of them to talk with Elise Strayer. But in the initial sign up, we were a little short. We had a stronger sign up. We wound up with about 260 people who originally enrolled to get vaccinated last Friday. And we were able to get most of those folks vaccinated. And then we're doing an aggressive reach out this afternoon into our Hispanic community with Jorge's help and Elisa's help. But we're probably close to 85%. We're still trying to parse out the exact number.
Okay, but great news, and just encourage anybody who hasn't gotten vaccinated yet to please go ahead. Obviously, if you can't do it for certain medical reasons, that's your personal choice, but just encourage everybody to do that. It's a privilege. So
yeah, we're very fortunate.
So, you know, I wasn't on the vaccination list, so just encourage everybody to go ahead and take advantage of that opportunity and the privilege you've all been given in that sense. So,
and they've said that I can come vaccinate the board myself. So
I don't know. That might be a violation of some kind of policy.
I'm just kidding, Jonathan. Just kidding. That's absolutely. That's
the 2x4.
But that's the big joke. Hey, why don't you do it? And so, well, they're giving me the square needles to give the shots. So,
very good.
Yeah. So, sorry, board, we can't do that. Anyway, that concludes the report, and definitely not giving the board a shot. Just kidding, folks.
Thank you. We'll move on to, unless there are any other questions or comments, we'll move on to March 1 agenda items. We have a list. Community school board work session, calendar, bond update, student services update, AEA update, summer school update. And then 7 is action item 8.E, and I think Eliza wanted to say something here, right, Eliza?
Yes, so I wanted to bring up the fact, let me just grab it real quick for GPAE. There are 2 items in particular. We have a meeting scheduled for Monday, April 5th, and that is the first day back from spring break for all staff. There's no students here, but we will be back. I was curious if we could push it to the 6th, which is Tuesday, just to give our staff kind of a few hours to gather some of the information and so we're not rushing. And then the similar situation for April 19th is a Monday, and we are actually not in, that is our April break. And just curious again, if we could push it to Tuesday, if it does not affect anyone's schedules.
Looks like it's a go.
Fine with me.
Yeah, what was the first one? I'm sorry, I didn't catch that, Eliza.
The first one's April 5th, and that's the first day back from spring break, and all of our staff is out the week before. So just gathering reports from staff. And
both of those are fine. Thanks. Yep, I'm good.
Okay, thank you.
And Eliza, were we also going to ask the board to kind of think about maybe moving off of Mondays for next year? We've traditionally been on Mondays, but it seems like there's a lot of holidays on Mondays, and there's a lot of it would be on Monday, but we're on a vacation. So can we kick it to a Tuesday or, if we move to like a Tuesday, Wednesday or Thursday, next year, not this year, next year, it might make for greater continuity and more ability for administration to have the agenda organized and to you in a fashion where we're not jammed up and working over holidays to make sure that we're ready to go on that Monday. Would the board be open? This is a board decision.
You want to, it's fine with me if we start right now. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't know if anybody else has a problem with that. I know sometimes it's harder to move schedules, but for me, I'm fine with Tuesday.
My only issue is when work travel starts again. Monday allows for still having a work travel week. So as long as we're gonna keep the ability to have remote participation when needed.
And we can address that through board policy. I certainly think that COVID has taught us that we need to be more flexible and make sure that that's baked into how we do business.
Yeah. Does Susan or Dwayne or anyone on the board have any idea why it was always Mondays? I didn't really have any historical reference.
You got to ask that of Susan, man. She's been here forever.
Because I'm so old.
So old. Ask her.
Yeah, I don't know. No reason that I know of.
Okay, perfect.
And timing wise, I don't know why it was ever. I mean, there were some times when we wanted to have staff members, so we would have it during the school day hours. But other than that, I don't know.
And the question of, has been raised, if we do it remote, does someone have to participate from beginning to end, or can they come in just for a vote? And sometimes the discussion at the beginning impacts the decisions at the end. So that was something that we can talk about when we talk about a policy change. We can discuss those ramifications.
Yeah, maybe we can move some of the consent action items to the front end of the meeting if needed for voting purposes.
I don't think that's the issue. I think Katie just wants, and me too. I mean, it's not a problem of scheduling the time. It's if we're traveling all week, we just need to be able to connect remotely. And Tuesday is a little more complicated once travel starts again than Monday is. So I think that's the only request. So we could just probably even make a quick change to that policy and just say, board members are allowed to attend meetings remotely via video conference or whatever. And I don't know if we want to time bound it or something like that, so it has to come up again, so it doesn't become an indefinite thing. But I think that's all we need to do.
We already have some temporary policy in place to have these remote meetings, right? So I don't know.
Yeah.
There's a state policy, statewide policy, and we looked at this last year. There's a statewide policy to allow remote even before COVID happened, which we could easily find and adopt.
Sounds like a job for Eliza.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Okay.
All right, we'll bring that forward, in March.
Anything else, Eliza?
Dave, if I may, I just want you to keep in mind too, though, remember, we got to be sensitive to the extent that we can be here, should be here, can't, board members and board meetings are best, in the house, for the house, with the people in the house. And I know that, can be done later when we get past this COVID world, but all of those policies of having remote participation were, I think, a bit of a backstop, kind of a secondary thing. I mean, I just want to make sure we don't lose that bias. And I don't think that Katie and Jonathan are saying anything other than that. I'm not putting, not at all criticizing. I'm just simply, I'm sure we all agree. It's like, we're with the community and we're with the organization. We need to be present as much as we can.
Yeah, no, I was just pointing out, for once the world gets back to normal, Jonathan and I both travel extensively for work, and Tuesday night is twice a month, kills 2 weeks of potential travel all the time. So, which is, kind of not what we signed up for. So I just want to keep the option open when needed for whatever the various work things are. We're all on volunteers here, right, Dwayne? So.
As a
I'm
note,
getting paid big bucks.
Yeah. Especially for the hours worked. No, I think, yeah, the only thing was saying, hey, we're happy to move it to Tuesday just as long as we can have that other flexibility. If not, it makes it more complicated. That's
Can
it.
you either of you briefly explain why Tuesday messes everything up for 2 weeks? I just don't understand.
Because it takes me a full day to travel to most places I go, which means I would travel on a Wednesday and have two work days, Thursday and Friday to be someplace where I'm going.
You're assuming you don't do it wherever you are. You don't get online wherever you are.
No, I do. My point is I can't go wherever I am if I can't do it remote. I can't travel if we have to be in
Make it
person.
all remote. I mean, but that policy is a no-brainer. I think Susan and I, we looked at it last year at one point. Do you remember, Susan? There is.
Yeah, I think we passed some resolution that has to do with COVID. We would need to probably change our policy permanently. And I think we were also considering, if we can get our boardroom set up so that some can be remote and some can be in person, and that works well. And so all of those things, are working towards that world where, yes, somebody could be remote and whoever's here and can be here should be in person. It's just kind of a work in progress at this point, and probably does involve a change in our policy permanently.
Well, Elijah and I will take a look at it and try to put something together for review.
Yeah, and Susan, you're correct that in that timeline of events that we passed it for COVID, and then we said we revisit it after COVID, which we all thought would be way sooner than this.
A month later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But honestly, I don't see that this is lower quality. Do you all think these are lower quality meetings than being when we were in person? I don't.
No, and we get a lot of community involvement because it's easy for them to log on. So I don't want to, undo that. But I also think that being in person is also a really nice way to work together. So we should be able to retain the good parts and, move forward in a regular way someday.
Okay, so Eliza, there's a note about dates for an AEA.
Yes, correct. So I shared some dates where AEA is available. Stephanie and Marnie to kind of talk about what we discussed at last meeting, having kind of more of a board working session. Susie, we did talk, it seems like Jonathan and Dwayne, you've been elected to kind of spearhead these conversations. So there's a few dates in there. So I just want to work with you two to see if we can.
Unless you don't want to, unless one of you prefers not to.
No, I'm happy to do it, but let's just take that offline to schedule it, Eliza.
Okay, I just want to make sure that
everybody has to listen to ours.
Thank you, both of you. And so we'll go to 7.2, support of suspending state assessments. Dave?
Yeah, I wound up catching up with the CASB legal person, and the intention was to suspend the CMAS tests and not the secondary PSAT, SAT test. And we can just add the sentence that says we support suspending CMAS for this year. And I've been in a robust conversation earlier this evening anyway, and around testing, and you heard Theron talking a lot about it, but the CMAS testing is more problematic for our students, just because we're in school, we're out of school, we're remote, we're in person, and every single school district across the country is facing that, and certainly across Colorado. So the CMAS testing will be of dubious value this year. The PSAT and SAT will continue to be used to help inform coursework that students would take in a high school, as well as the college application process. So we can just adjust the resolution to fit that. It's our resolution, and she was very clear that we can make it say whatever we want. And she also said that they could have been a little clearer when they sent it out to us initially. So that's where we are on the resolution.
So that needs does that need another vote?
Well, we did add the language in that last paragraph regarding the recommendations to suspend CMAS. However, we support PSAT and SAT. So that was kind of a big change.
So that was the modification to our resolution.
We didn't vote on it last time,
We
Susie.
did not vote on it.
So we need to vote on it, don't we?
Yes.
Okay.
I have one comment though about it before we do that. Sorry.
Go ahead.
The description of what says, whereas the board believes that high stakes standardized assessments, is there a reason why we have to call them high stakes and we can't just call them standardized assessments instead of making a qualifier that
Nope, we can take out high stakes.
Yeah, we had talked about that before.
Okay.
I will support it with that change.
All right.
So striking high stakes, and then we'll just need someone's motion to approve that.
I will make a motion to, I'd make a motion to approve item 7.2 ASD resolution as amended this evening and as presented here by the staff.
Second. Okay.
Quick roll call. Katie Frisch.
Aye.
Susan Merle.
Aye.
Jonathan Nickel.
Aye.
Dwayne Romero.
Aye.
And Susie Zimmett.
Aye.
Okay, so moved. I'll just make those changes and send it off.
I'll make a motion to approve 7.1 GP80 annual agenda planning exhibit with the 2 amendments that was discussed and presented this evening.
Second? Somebody second?
Oh, second.
And then roll call would be Katie Frisch.
Aye.
Susan Merle.
Aye.
Jonathan Nickel.
Aye.
Dwayne Romero.
Aye.
And Susie Zimmett.
Aye. And we could have thrown in the consent agenda.
I make a motion to approve item number 8, consent action items as presented this evening.
Second.
Okay. Roll call to approve 8.1 through 8.5. Katie Frisch.
Aye.
Susan Merle.
Aye.
Jonathan Nickel.
Aye.
Dwayne Romero.
Aye.
And Susie Zimmett.
Aye, sorry.
You're fine. So moved. Thank you.
Great. Personnel, oh, we did that. Okay. Future agenda items. DSR policies we'll review with the superintendent. Jonathan suggesting key tasks for our board priorities.
Hey, help me out with my spreadsheet, guys. I sent that out to everybody in terms of the more detail on what all the priorities were and then progress made. I need.
What month did you send it out? What month did you send it out? Approximately.
No, I sent it out last week.
Last week.
Yes.
I sent it out twice, so help me out so we can put it on get it on the next agenda and review it.
Okay.
Yeah, I may have pitched some things to you. I don't know if you saw them. I can't remember. I think I pitched something into you. Take a look.
Okay, I'll check.
Roger that.
Thank you.
Jonathan, this is a different document from all our policies that you've sent twice.
Correct. It's in Google Docs that basically has the priorities that we had initially. Remember, we made our priorities, then we agreed that I would take a first crack at detailing them. I have done that and also added a little progress on the ones that I had specific information. But, you know, before we go ahead and circulate it, I would like to get everybody's input. So just send me back your comments individually, please.
Got it. Thank you. And then work session with Gilbert Sanchez regarding facilities, couple months, Dave or Dwayne, or cut from now, April.
We're going to have that, Dave. That's probably some input back from Kari Ellen and Susan. I'm sure you'd agree, right? With Gilbert, we just probably need to get that out on the somewhere here in the next 4 to 6 weeks, Dave, as a body of update.
As part of the bond update, we'll continue to refresh that.
Yeah, it probably would be helpful though to kind of illustrate some of the progress once, once they re-kick. They're going to need a little bit of fresh start on some of the concepts. And you
Yep.
and Jorge obviously have kicked around a lot of stuff too.
Absolutely.
So I think that brings up the next comment on the strategic planning stuff, that if we're going to finalize the facilities, we need to do that because they tie together, and they're not tied together yet.
Right.
So timing for that, is that still May, June? Are we going to need it as an offsite type of thing, or?
Do we need to move it up to April? Are you suggesting move it up?
I'm suggesting we should, if it's not a regular board meeting, that we should probably start working on timing of that, because that could be a lot of hours to try to block out.
Okay.
I know it's only February.
Or Eliza?
So you're referencing strategic planning, correct?
And,
so Dave, I guess the question would be if Anne wants to come out for on-site again, or if this would be more of a digital, which we would just have to do a work session, basically, similar to what we did this summer.
Okay. I'm sure she's happy to come out and do onsite. I'm gonna guess that she qualified for a vaccine in New York. So, and I have not spoken with her lately, but we can look at April for that.
Great.
Yep. Whatever works for timing. I think I just want to make sure that we're tied into the facilities, that we're not too late, right?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Very good point.
Well, I think, from a strategic planning process like that, there's what we've told the taxpayers we're going to do around the bond piece, right? That drives that piece. And then there's the strategic plan, which is influencing what we want to do, right? And we haven't quite finalized that strategic planning piece. That's what you're saying?
Mm-hmm.
But then we also have the board's strategic plan, which we did this fall or summerish, going into fall. And then there's the greater part of the community piece that has to come in on that, right? And so when that can happen is a big question. And do we want Anne to help with that piece or with this group here?
I don't know. It's a question for you.
Well,
How is it all going to fit together as it's starting to come down?
Yeah, I mean,
I'm up for, listening to whatever you have to propose about it. I'm just suggesting that it's mid-February, and, we probably need to start planning some time to make sure that we have the time that we need to do it outside of in a work session type of environment.
Yeah, and I don't see her expertise as like on buildings or facilities. So I would think to stick with us, stick with our goals, and maybe combine it with what Jonathan's talking about, board priorities. Maybe have us all prepared to say what our board priorities are when we meet with Anne.
okay, well, Eliza and I will reach out to Anne tomorrow and see what her availability is for April. And we can go from there. And then I will come back to this group with a proposal around that.
Jonathan, were you hoping we would be discussing them sooner than when we meet with her?
Well, these are the ones we set last year. So, I mean, we gotta, these were September, basically, when we set these. So we gotta kind of give ourselves the update and the evaluation on that. Make sure we're doing what we said we were gonna do.
Got it. So unrelated to Anne meeting with Anne Delahunt. Got it.
Yeah,
Got
that's kind of a separate thing, which is moving forward with the strategic plan.
Got it. Continuing to work on outstanding issues and evaluating current in-person learning. Dave does that beautifully, right? We don't need a separate topic for that.
Nope.
Tracking of action items. What's that about, Eliza? Do you know? Or
yeah, we've discussed this before. Just kind of having a solid list of action items of requests from the board from each meeting. I think we just have to get back on that. and kind of sending out, you know, where we are in this, where we are with it, you know, whether it's been completed or continuing or work in progress. So I think that's definitely on my end that we could do that.
Great, thank you.
With Jonathan.
IB discussions, that's sort of ongoing, right? And summer school will have some presentation at some point about that?
March 1st.
March, great. And then shall we, Dwayne, it's your debrief.
Okay. All right. Let's see. It's 7:20. That's good work, right? That's 3 hours, 20 minutes. We did the people's work in a pretty nice, concise window. I think it's fun to see our progress in our governing style. I mean, I think we're, you know, doing a good job of moving towards, you know, focusing on results and focusing on, you know, kids' achievement. Obviously trying to move away from kind of the tactical stuff that we encountered over the last several months. Not to say that any of that is over, but it's refreshing to have a quality conversation on academic progress, academic growth, achievement, and, you know, developing strategies and supporting the staff in the execution of those strategies. So I think that's a good governing style that we should continue to work on and strengthen. I also think that, you know, we're doing a better job of trying to represent ourselves as a board, not as a collection of individual board members. So there's a lot of, I think, respect and deference towards differing opinions and trying to, you know, bring together a consolidated view at the board level. As we know, that's kind of part of our ultimate duty and assignment, is to, you know, kind of work on it and attack the issues and be really hard on the challenges, but you know, being very respectful of individuals and personalities, and then, you know, having good discourse, but then coming back together as we did even this evening, trying to find consensus and give good guidance and take some constructive feedback and incorporate it. So and Susie, great work on just keeping us on schedule and on agenda, and Eliza, as always, you know, you continue to really help us be better and kind of keep us on the straight and narrow, which is very helpful. And I think the community as well appreciates that. So good work. Thank you.
Thank you. To be honest, I thought it was 2 hours and 20 minutes. So I apologize that we went an hour longer than I thought we were going.
But it was results oriented, and it was talking about academic progress and the work that's still in front of us. So it was great feedback from our leadership staff and the teachers. So
No, I thought it was a great meeting. I just know the research says that nobody can concentrate after 2 hours. Nobody. Nobody.
Well, we just did it. So there.
So can we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I'll second.
Liza?
Okay, quick roll call. Katie Frisch.
Aye.
Susan Marolt.
Aye.
Jonathan Nickel.
Thank you Stephanie for her conference, for her kind comments, and Nick Sturts for his great email with the pictures of the snow day. Aye.
Okay. Dwayne Romero.
Aye.
And Susie Zimet.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks everybody.
Peace out. Thank you.